Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where central heating doesn't exist. Your boots are probably made of straw and hope, and surviving the next 4 months isn't just hard, it's legendary. We're talking about a medieval winter in a small European village, where snow is less cosy backdrop and more potential death sentence. You'll have no antibiotics, no thermostats, no DoorDash. Just you, your neighbours, your goat if it hasn't frozen yet, and the unforgiving chill of a long dark season. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your city and what time it is right now. I'm always curious who's out there listening in the dark. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first flake falls in mid-October. That's your first bad sign. You're outside, ankle deep in wet leaves, trying to coax your last turnips from the half-frozen soil. Your breath clouds the air and your fingers are already numb even though it's barely noon. You glance up, hoping it's just an early flurry. But no. The clouds are heavy, grey as boiled mutton, and they don't look like they're done with you. You trudge home, sack slung over your shoulder, bones aching from work and worry. Your home is a single room, one thatched roof, a wattle and door wall that lets in more wind than you'd like, and a fire pit that smokes half the time and sputters the rest. You share it with your family, which might mean 7 people crammed into a space smaller than a modern studio apartment. No privacy, no silence, and certainly no warmth. Just body heat, old blankets, and hope. The chill settles fast. Within a week, the paths are icy. Your thatched roof crackles with frost in the morning. The sun barely peeks over the hills before it dips again, and the days shorten so quickly it's like the world is closing in on itself. Night comes early and it stays. Inside the village, the mood shifts with the weather. People walk faster, talk less. Laughter becomes a summer memory, something as distant as ripe berries. You feel it in your bones, and so does everyone else. It's not just the temperature, it's the fear. Winter isn't just cold, it's hungry. You watch your neighbours haul firewood like their lives depend on it, because they do. You join them, hacking at the same ancient trees with dull axes and blistered hands. You're not just gathering fuel, you're racing against time. And even as you stack the logs outside your door, you know it won't be enough. It never is. You sleep in your clothes now, everyone does. You stuff straw between your shirt and tunic for insulation, and wrap your feet in scraps of linen under worn leather boots. At night, you huddle close with your siblings, your breath rising in pale clouds. The fire pops and hisses, half-hearted in its warmth. You don't talk much anymore. The cold has a way of silencing things. At the manor house on the hill, the lord lights more candles. His walls are stone and thick, and there's a great hall with tapestries meant to block the draught. He has wine and salted meat, and someone else to chop his firewood. But even there the winter creeps in. The dogs sleep by the hearth, and sometimes even he pulls his cloak tighter at night. But here in the village, everything becomes harder. The cold numbs your fingers during chores. The well freezes over and you have to break the surface each morning, hoping not to drop the bucket again. Your breath fogs the air indoors and frost forms on the inside of your window, if you're lucky enough to have one. By early December, the snow comes in earnest. It piles up fast, muffling the village in thick white silence, and with it, a sense of isolation. The roads are useless now. No traders come, no messages leave. It's just you, your tiny community, and the vast cold nothing pressing in from all sides. You remember an old woman once said winter was like a test one the land gives you to see if you're worth keeping. You used to laugh at that. You don't laugh anymore. Here's something most people don't realise. Winters were often deadlier than wars. In some years, more people in your village died from exposure, hunger or illness during winter than from sword wounds or battlefield injuries. Your survival depends on food, fuel and luck. Miss any one of those and you're done. And yet people do survive. That's the strange magic of it. They adapt, they prepare, they lean on each other. Families pool resources. Neighbours share bread, fire, even shelter. If your roof collapses under snow, someone makes room. If your goat dies, someone offers milk from theirs. Not out of kindness always, but because they know next time it could not be them. One freezing night lying beside the fire, your belly half full with boiled roots and watery ale, you wonder how people even came to live here. Why settle in a place where nature seems to want you dead for half the year? The answer is simple. because this is what they had, and because survival is its own kind of triumph. You drift off listening to the whistle of wind through the cracks in the walls and the pop of firewood. The stars are out, barely visible through the smoke hole in the ceiling. Somewhere in the woods wolves howl, and you think to yourself, not for the first time, that you just have to make it to spring. One fact you'll carry with you tonight, the phrase Fimbulwinter from Norse legend, described a winter so long and cold it would end the world. And though you're not in Ragnarok, you can't help but feel that, for a few months, every year it sure gets close. You wake up colder than when you went to sleep. It's still dark outside, not that it matters. The sky stays grey most of the time anyway, like the world forgot how to be bright. Your back aches from the hard floor, your breath hangs in the air, and the fires burn down to a crusty glow. You scramble to feed it a few twigs and dried cow dung patties before it dies entirely. If it goes out now, it'll take hours to get it back. You don't bother taking off your layers anymore. The clothes you wore yesterday are the same ones you'll wear tomorrow. Undressing isn't just unnecessary, it's dangerous. Skin exposed to this kind of cold, even indoors, might not recover. Chilblains and frostbite are real threats, and you've already got 2 purple toes you've been pretending not to notice. Today's goal, like every day this season, is simple. Keep the fire going and eat something, anything. That's where autumn comes in. If you didn't prepare in the months leading up to winter, you're in serious trouble now. The medieval calendar revolves around this kind of preparation. September and October aren't cosy harvest months with pumpkin spice vibes. They are full-scale logistical marathons. Every root, fruit and grain has to be harvested, stored, dried, salted, smoked or buried. If you don't do that, there's no store down the road to bail you out. You either have it or you don't. You remember the harvest weeks, long, back-breaking days bent over fields, fingers raw, shoulders burning. The threshing floor full of barley, the slow methodical beat of flails as you separated grain from chaff. There are piles of turnips, parsnips, onions, and garlic twisted into ropes and hung from rafters. The salted pork layered in barrels with thick slabs of fat and even thicker prayers that it won't rot. You helped stack them yourself, and now that prep either pays off or punishes you. Some villagers have root cellars, pits dug beneath or beside homes, lined with straw and clay jars. You don't, but your cousin does, so you trade firewood for access to his carrots and swedes. That's what winter becomes, a delicate, ongoing barter. A slice of smoked eel for a wedge of hard cheese, a clay jug of ale for 3 dry logs. Nobody's rich in coin, but the currency of survival flows fast and constantly. Then there are the people who didn't prepare. Maybe their harvest was weak. Maybe their roof leaked and mould got to the grain. Maybe rats found their way into the pantry. Whatever the reason, you see it in their eyes now, desperation. They linger near better-stocked neighbours. They hover around the church hoping for alms. They are your stew pot when they pass by, and you can feel the tension in their hunger. The worst part? You can't even be mad. You've been there before. You might be there again next winter. Everyone walks a line. And when winter hits, that line becomes razor thin. You hear stories from nearby villages where people have already started boiling bark or making thin soups out of old bones and dried nettles. One rumour said a man in Southwyke tried to eat his leather boots. Another said he boiled his dog. You don't want to believe it, but it wouldn't be the first time starvation pushed people past the edge of decency. In your own cottage, meals are shrinking. The bread loaves are thinner now, more oat husk and dried bean flour than actual grain. You stretch stew with water until it's more liquid than food. You chew slowly, swallowing hope alongside whatever unidentifiable root chunk made it into the pot. There's a dark, unspoken knowledge shared by everyone in the village. You can't eat all your stores. You have to ration. If you feast now, you die later. But if you eat too little, you weaken. Then catch cold or worse, pneumonia. It's a slow, cruel calculus. Too much, too fast, gone by January. Too little, too late, gone before Christmas. The ones who do best are the hoarders. You know the type, quiet, stingy, with barns mysteriously full and doors always locked. One of them, a woman named Agnes, is rumoured to have salted fish hidden beneath her floorboards. She never confirms it, but you catch a whiff of something oily and fishy every time you pass her door. She's not sharing, of course, not unless you have something truly valuable, like beeswax, or a pair of iron shears, or secrets. In better times, village life is about cooperation. But winter's about negotiation, and all of this elaborate communal dance of preparation and desperation, has its roots in a real medieval phenomenon, the hungry gap. That's the bleak period between the end of winter stores and the first spring growth. For many peasants, especially in lean years, it started as early as January and dragged into April. You'd think spring would bring immediate relief, but nope. Until the first greens sprouted and animals fattened up again, people lived off the dregs of their stores, if any were left. Sometimes, those last stores were seeds meant for planting, and more than once someone in the village made the impossible choice. Eat them now and risk no harvest, or starve and hope the next generation survives. And here's the quirky part. During this time, people turned to things you'd never think of as food. Tree bark, moss, old leather. In Iceland, families reportedly ate dried fish bones ground into meal and baked into hard cakes. In parts of Eastern Europe, lichen from rocks was boiled into paste. Anything to fill the stomach, anything to quiet the hunger. And then there's the debate, the one that still stirs up historians. How often did communities really descend into starvation or cannibalism? Some argue it was more common than we care to admit, hidden behind church records and folklore. Others insist it was rare, that medieval resilience and communal support prevented most famines from becoming horror stories. The truth? Somewhere in the middle. Like most things from this era, it depends on the year, the harvest, the region, and a little bit on luck. Back in your own little world, you take inventory again. Half a wheel of cheese, 2 onions, a bundle of dried herbs, a chunk of salt pork that looks suspiciously grey. Not ideal, but not hopeless either. You toss a few more twigs into the fire and stir the pot with a carved wooden spoon, hoping whatever's in there tastes more like food than it smells. Tomorrow you'll visit your cousin again. Maybe trade some of your pork for apples, if he hasn't eaten them already. You huddle closer to the hearth, legs tucked under you, listening to the soft crackle of the flames and the occasional cough from your mother in the corner. Your stomach growls, the stew bubbles, and outside the snow falls steadily, silent, indifferent, and endless. You smell the bakehouse before you see it. The heavy earthy aroma of browning crust, yeasty dough, and smouldering oak wood drifts through the shut village like a warm promise. Your stomach clenches the second it hits your nose. You weren't even planning to go there today, but now your feet are taking you toward it like they've got a will of their own. It's still early morning and the snow crunches under your boots as you approach. The path is packed hard from so many trudging feet. Everyone's been here recently, of course they have. When the temperature drops and everything else becomes grey and cold, the bakehouse is one of the only places that still feels alive. It's more than a building. It's a ritual, a lifeline, and, depending on who you ask, a confession booth, a gossip corner, or a therapy session rolled into one. The bakehouse sits at the edge of the village square, low and squat, with smoke curling from its central chimney. The walls are thick stone mercifully windproof, and the door is crooked, barely hanging on by iron hinges older than your grandmother. But the oven inside, that's the heart of it all. A massive communal beehive oven built into the back wall, blackened with soot and older than any living soul in the village. You push open the door, and immediately the warmth washes over you. It's like stepping into a completely different world. The heat makes your cheeks flush and your eyelashes prickle with moisture. Inside, it's yaps crowded and busy in a way that somehow calms you. Several villagers are already there, sleeves rolled up, leaning over loaves or adjusting coals with long-handled wooden paddles. You nod to a few familiar faces. There are no formal greetings this early. Everyone's half frozen and sleep-starved. The bakehouse is communal property, one of the few things in the village that belongs to no one and everyone at the same time. No one has the resources to build their own oven, nor would they want to. It burns hot, takes hours to heat, and demands serious maintenance. So instead, people bring their dough, prepared at home, and bake it here on the assigned days or in early morning batches. It's efficient, and in the winter, it's one of the only places where heat, community, and sustenance collide. You find a spot on the bench near the back and unwrap your parcel, 2 small loaves of dark rye dough, rough with ground beans and barley. You shaped them last night with trembling hands and a quiet prayer that they wouldn't collapse in the oven like last time. There's a certain humiliation in failed bread. Everyone can smell it, literally. While you wait your turn, you listen. The bakehouse is where everything gets said. Secrets, confessions, suspicions. Today it's mostly murmurs about that sick boy in the miller's family. He's been coughing blood, apparently. Not a good sign in any season, but especially not now, when illness moves like wildfire and no one has the strength to stop it. Old Beatrix says it's just winter fever. Young Thomas insists it's a punishment for something. You don't offer an opinion. You just turn your loaves in your lap and wonder quietly if you're the next one to catch it. When it's your turn, you step forward and hand your loaves to the oven master, an elderly man named Edric with soot-stained hands and a perpetual scowl. He takes them without a word, pokes them each with a stubby finger, then places them deep inside the glowing mouth of the oven using a long-handled peel. It's mesmerising watching him work. He knows just where to place each loaf, how to rotate them mid-bake, how to read the shifting colour of the crust. This isn't just baking, it's alchemy. You sit again, feeling the blessed warmth on your back, letting the bread rise and bake, and become something that might actually keep you alive this week. The bakehouse isn't just about bread, though. It's one of the rare buildings in the village that's consistently warm, and that makes it a magnet for all sorts of behaviour. A few people pretend to hang around for their bread, but they're just here to warm their bones. You see a pair of old men tucked into the corner, playing a slow game of 9 men's Morris with carved stones. A woman is braiding her daughter's hair, steam rising gently off the girl's damp scalp. Someone else is snoring softly near the chimney, half asleep with a half-frozen hunk of cheese clutched to their chest. You close your eyes for a moment too, soaking in the comfort like a lizard on a warm rock. It feels good. Too good. Dangerous even. You remind yourself not to fall asleep. You still have chores, and that fire at home won't feed itself. After what feels like both a second and an hour, Edric calls your name. You hurry over and receive your loaves, dark brown, blistered in all the right places, and gloriously hot in your hands. You bite into one before you even step outside, burning your tongue slightly but not caring. It's real, it's warm, it's food. And here's your historical fun fact to savour with that crusty bite. In medieval villages across Europe, especially in France and England, communal bakehouses were legally mandated in some regions. Lords built them as a service, though sometimes with a catch. You were required to use the lord's oven, and he'd take a fee or a portion of the bread. The word banal oven comes from this. Ban, meaning the lord's legal control over it. Bread, like everything else, came with a price tag and a power dynamic. But back in your own village, it feels a bit more egalitarian. Maybe because the lord doesn't visit in winter. Maybe because hunger levels the playing field. Or maybe because when you're standing around with cracked lips and frostbitten toes, waiting for your turn at the oven, everyone looks the same. Still, there's debate among scholars about just how communal these bakehouses really were. Some argue they fostered cooperation and strengthened village bonds. Others claim they were tools of feudal control, reinforcing the hierarchy one loaf at a time. Like everything in history, it's not black and white, just a muddy brown, like the crust of your slightly overdone rye bread. You wrap your loaves in your cloak and step outside again, instantly missing the warmth. The wind slices through your clothes like a knife, and your fingers ache with the cold. But you've got bread now, real bread. Enough to last a couple of days if you're careful. You start walking home feeling oddly triumphant. You didn't grow the grain, you didn't build the oven, but you mixed the dough, you brought it here, you waited your turn, and now you carry your small reward through the snow like a treasure. The cold bites, the sky's still grey, and your breath still fogs in front of you. But your belly is warm, your bag is full, and tonight at least you will eat. The wind doesn't knock politely, it howls. It presses against the walls of your home like it wants in, clawing through every crack and knot in the timber frame. There's no escaping it. Your house isn't really a house, not by modern standards. It's a hut, really. A wattle and daub shell with a thatched roof that sags in places, patched with mud and straw, all of it fighting a slow, steady war with the weather. And most days, the weather wins. You close the door behind you, a rough wooden plank with a leather hinge, and brace it with a stone. There's no lock. You're not worried about thieves tonight. You're worried about the wind knocking it off its moorings again. The last time that happened, snow drifted in and froze your shoes solid. You still haven't forgiven the door. Inside, the air is warmer than outside, but not by much. The fire helps, sort of, but it's a smoky thing that chokes more than it comforts. Your eyes burn as you bend to coax the embers into flame again. You shove in a few twigs and one of your precious firewood chunks. It catches reluctantly. The light flickers over the walls, revealing the way they bulge slightly inward, warped from time, moisture, and a lack of sympathy from the universe. Insulation is a joke. The wind seeps in through the walls, the roof, the floor, everything leaks. You've stuffed sheep's wool into the worst gaps, pressed old rags into the crevices between the timbers, and even tacked up a bit of woven matting along the north wall to keep out the sharpest drafts. It helps, sort of, but there's no stopping cold like this. It's not air, it's something else. It settles in your bones. It clings. The roof groans again overhead. That thatch? It's the village's version of a miracle. Bundles of tightly bound straw layered in overlapping rows, designed to shed rain and snow. And in spring it even sort of works. But now, with snow piling high and icicles creeping from the eaves, it sags in heavy sheets. You eye the ceiling, silently daring it to hold. One of the worst parts of winter is the fear of roof collapse. It happens, sometimes at night. People don't always make it out. You remember last year when the widow Oldwith's roof gave out after a snowstorm? Half her cottage caved in. She crawled out, but her cat didn't. You still think of the quiet way she stood by the rubble, holding her cat's frozen paw like she might bring it back to life. So yeah, thatch can betray you, but if you're lucky, and you layer it thick and heavy, and patch it obsessively through the autumn, it holds. The trick is in the angle. Steep roofs shed snow better. Yours is just steep enough to avoid disaster, but shallow enough to creak in warning every time a gust rattles the trees. The floor beneath your feet is packed with earth. You've swept it smooth with a bundle of twigs tied into a brush. There's hay strewn over it for insulation, not from the cold, but from the moisture that seeps up from the frozen ground. When it gets wet and mouldy, you just spread more hay. Eventually it all becomes part of the floor. It's not clean. Nothing here is clean. But it's livable. Just. At the far end of the room, your family is bundled under layers of rough wool. Blankets, cloaks, old sacks stitched into quilts. Your youngest sibling has a bit of sheepskin over their shoulders, the curls matted with age but still soft. Everyone is tucked close together, cocooned in what warmth the fire throws off. You're lucky to have one room. It means you all benefit from the same heat source. Privacy died sometime in the 1200s, and nobody really misses it. The house smells like smoke, wet wool, unwashed bodies, and boiled cabbage. Occasionally someone opens the door too quickly, and the draft sets the fire sputtering and sends smoke rolling across the ceiling like a low fog. You keep a hole in the thatch to let it out. A simple smoke hole, no chimney. The richer houses have proper stone flues. You have a hole and a prayer that rain or snow doesn't drop in while you're cooking. As bad as it is in here, it's better than being outside. That's why, come winter, homes become hibernation dens. You work when you have to, feeding animals, fetching water, gathering fuel, but otherwise, you stay inside, you mend, you craft, you talk, you listen to stories, or you sit in silence, saving your breath for something worth saying. Here's a bit of history to settle into. Most medieval peasants' homes were single-room structures, sometimes shared with animals. That's not just a poverty thing, it's a heat strategy. Animals radiate body warmth. Keeping the family pig inside during winter isn't weird, it's practical. Some folks even built small byres attached to their living space so the cows could snuggle close, separated by a waist-high wall. Gross? Sure. Effective? Absolutely. And while we're at it, here's a weird fact for your next trivia night. Some medieval people sealed their windows with animal bladders or thin parchment soaked in oil. Glass was expensive, so they made do. It filtered light, blocked some wind, and gave your home a faint smell of whatever unfortunate creature contributed their organs to your winter coziness. Now here's the scholarly debate you can chew on, like the crust of your rye bread. Just how bad were these houses, really? Some historians argue the image of damp, miserable peasant homes is exaggerated, romanticised by later centuries. They point to well-built cottages in preserved villages that show signs of care, craftsmanship, and even aesthetic choices. Others say those are the rare exceptions. The majority of peasants lived in structurally precarious homes that failed often and left people dangerously exposed. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in the middle. Some houses held strong, some didn't. Your own house is hanging on, barely. You lean against the wall, feeling the cold seep into your shoulder through the daub. It's not a sharp cold, it's slow, creeping, like mould or regret. You know that if the fire dies, everything else will follow, so you check it again, add another log, send a little curse to the wind. Your sibling stirs and mutters something in their sleep. You pull the wool blanket up around their shoulders. Careful not to let your own heat escape. You sit down beside the fire, draw your knees to your chest, and stare into the dancing flame. You think about the roof, the walls, the freezing wind that never seems to sleep, but you're still here. The house still stands. For now, that's enough. You wake to the sound of wood splitting, sharp, clean and unmistakable. Not inside, thankfully. Outside. Someone else is already at it. You lie there for a moment, listening to the rhythmic crack of an axe head breaking through frozen timber, echoing across the village like a heartbeat. You envy their motivation, or maybe it's desperation. It's hard to tell the difference in winter. Eventually you drag yourself up, bones stiff and fingers barely responding. You stretch just enough to hear something in your spine pop, then shove your feet into stiff leather shoes still damp from yesterday's snow. The fire has burned low, so you feed it a handful of kindling and a dried cow pat before slipping outside with your hat pulled low and your axe slung over your shoulder. The cold hits you like a slap, raw and immediate. Your breath fogs, your eyes water, and your cheeks ache before you even make it 10 steps. The snow crunches beneath your boots, deep and crusted over, refusing to melt even slightly. There's no sun, just that endless lead-coloured sky pressing down on the world. Firewood is everything. It's heat, it's light, it's the only thing keeping your fingers from turning blue, and it never ever feels like you have enough. You make your way to the edge of the village, to the same small copse of trees you've been hacking at since October. It's not a forest, just a gathering of old, twisted things too stubborn to die. They stand leafless now, skeletal and dark, bark brittle from the cold. You know them well. You've named a few of them. Stumpy, Witchwood, Core, and your personal favourite, the gilt log, which dropped a branch on your uncle last year. He still limps, you set to work, the axe is dull, your hands are clumsy. Every swing rattles your shoulders and sends little tremors down your spine. It's the kind of work that burns through your muscles and builds warmth from the inside out, until you stop, and then the chill sweeps right back in, twice as sharp. You chop for what feels like hours, stacking the logs in a rough sled you drag behind you. It's not glamorous work, and it's not even particularly efficient, but it's necessary. Without wood, your fire dies. When your fire dies, the rest of your life starts following. You know this intimately. Everyone does. You've heard the stories of those who couldn't gather enough, too old, too sick, too injured. They'd try to get by the burning straw, animal dung, or dried peat if they had it. But those things are weak fuel. They smoke more than they warm. Eventually people get desperate. You've seen houses stripped of their doors, chairs, even floorboards, anything that could be fed to the fire. There's an art to choosing the right wood. You learn over time. Ash is ideal. It burns well even when green. Oak burns hot but takes forever to dry. Willow, forget it. It's damp misery disguised as a tree. You learn to sniff out dry wood, to knock logs together and listen for that hollow ring. You become half lumberjack, half musician, tuned to the tones of survival. You haul the sled home with numb fingers and aching shoulders, puffing steam like a beast of burden. Inside, you stack the logs in a haphazard pile near the fire pit, where they'll stay dry-ish. Then you strip off your outer layers and sit by the fire, watching the flames catch and grow and fill the room with light. Here's a historical truth that might surprise you. Firewood wasn't just a peasant problem. Even castles could run out of wood. In fact, some medieval laws were passed specifically to regulate woodcutting because deforestation was becoming a serious issue in certain regions by the 14th century. Lords controlled access to forests, and if you were caught taking wood from the wrong tree, say one still rooted in the ground instead of fallen, you could be fined, flogged, or worse. Collecting deadwood was sometimes allowed, but the greenwood, that was theft, which means even your fire might be illegal technically, but you're not about to ask the reeve for permission every time you want to not die. And here's a quirky fact that makes you laugh sometimes when you're in the mood. Some villagers believed that certain trees had spirits, and burning their wood would invite misfortune. Yew was particularly feared, thought to bring bad dreams or hauntings. Hazel, on the other hand, was seen as protective. Of course, when it's mid-January and you're freezing to death, the tree's opinion on your firewood plan ranks just above, what colour is the snow today? Still, you hesitate sometimes before tossing in certain logs. Old habits, superstition wrapped around survival. There's another debate you've heard discussed in whispers at the bakehouse, whether it's better to gather little and often, or haul huge loads less frequently. Some argue that daily wood trips keep you active, warm and in tune with the forest. Others say you waste too much energy that way and risk injury or frostbite. Your neighbour Hal went out for a big haul last winter and didn't come back until the next day. Found half frozen, half conscious, with a crushed foot from a fallen branch. The foot's still attached, but barely. You fall somewhere in the middle. Big hauls when the weather is clear, smaller ones when it's biting cold. Balance, as with everything in winter, is the key. Back inside, the fire crackles nicely now. You sit close, holding your hands out until they tingle with returning blood. The logs hiss and pop, sending little sparks up through the smoke hole in the roof. The light dances across the walls, warming the space just enough that you can take off your hat without feeling suicidal. Your sister stirs from under her blanket and looks at the new pile of wood. "Enough?" she asks, her voice rough from sleep. You shake your head. "Never." She doesn't argue. She just wraps the blanket tighter and watches the flames with you. It's strange, really, how fire becomes everything. It feeds your food, your hope, your illusion of safety. Without it, you're just animals in a box waiting to freeze. With it, you're still animals in a box, sure, but warm ones, for now. And so tomorrow you'll go back out, you'll chop more, stack more, burn more, it's endless. But it's also the rhythm of your life, like breathing, or praying, or waiting for spring. You dress in layers, but let's be honest, nothing actually keeps the cold out. Not really, it just delays it. You've become an expert in layering, though. First comes the linen shift, scratchy and thin, but better than to bare skin. Over that, your wool tunic, thick, heavy, and stained with a dozen winters of use. Then the outer coat, stiff with grime and slightly damp around the cuffs. And finally, the hooded cloak, which might have once been green, but now carries the colour and smell of old potatoes. Your hands are wrapped in fingerless mittens you knitted yourself. Badly. One thumb has a hole big enough to let in a solid breeze, and the left one keeps unravelling no matter how many times you stitch it back up. But they're yours, and they work, mostly. Fashion doesn't exist here, not in winter. There's no room for vanity when frostbite's knocking on the door. You wear what's warm, and if it happens to be made out of goatskin or stitched together from 3 old tunics and a dead man's socks, so be it. The goal is survival, not style. But still, some of it does look kind of cool. There's something undeniably badass about being wrapped head to toe in fur and wool, face half covered, looking like you just emerged from the forest after punching a bear in the face. You glance at your reflection in the icy surface of a bucket and almost laugh. You look like a cross between a scarecrow and a druid. A warm scarecrow, though. Wool is your best friend. Sheep's wool, to be exact. You've sheared it, cleaned it, sort of, carded it, spun it into yarn and knit it into every possible shape you can imagine. Hats, socks, scarves, tunics, underpants. If it can be made from wool, it's been made, and then repaired again. You'd patch a sock with a sleeve if it meant one more day of warmth. But wool has its flaws. It's itchy. It holds water like a sponge, and after a few months of daily wear, it starts to smell like something between a damp cave and a particularly stubborn sheep. You've stopped noticing mostly, but when you get near the fire and the heat starts baking that scent out of your clothes, yeah, you notice. Then there's fur. Oh, fur. The golden prize of winter clothing. It's warm, it's soft, it's slightly controversial if you're wearing something fancier than you should be able to afford. Nobles wear fur-lined cloaks and trim their sleeves with foxtails like it's no big deal. The village priest has a hood lined with squirrel, and you've caught more than one pair of jealous eyes lingering on it during sermons. You've got a rabbit fur collar you're unreasonably proud of. It took weeks to get those pelts, and more weeks to figure out how to sew them onto your coat without mangling everything. Now, even if you're hungry, cold, and have a suspicious rash on your arm, you still have that collar, and in this village that means something. Some people get creative. One guy stitched together a full cloak out of badger pelts. He smells awful, but no one says a word because he's warm and we're jealous. Another woman, the widow with 3 sons, knits thick shawls out of dog hair brushed from her mastiff. It's surprisingly warm, if a little coarse. Resourcefulness beats fashion, every time. And let's not forget foot coverings, arguably the most important part of your winter wardrobe. Your boots are leather, worn thin and lined with hay that you change out every few days. Some folks wrap their feet in strips of wool before slipping them in. Others use rabbit skins with the fur turned inward. You tried that once. It was heavenly. And then it rotted. Now you stick with the hay. You trudge through the village square, watching everyone else in their various states of bundled survival. No 2 outfits are alike. One kid wears a tunic so long it drags in the snow. Another has stuffed feathers into her sleeves for insulation. An old man walks past with a cloak that looks suspiciously like it used to be a curtain. It was a curtain. His house doesn't have one anymore. And here's your quirky history nugget of the night. In parts of medieval Scandinavia, people used moss and animal hair as inner lining for gloves and hats. Some even sewed bird skins, feathers and all, into cloaks. The insulating properties were excellent, if a bit crunchy. Hey, when your nose might fall off from frostbite, crunch is the least of your concerns. But let's get into the real debate now. Was medieval winter clothing actually effective? Some scholars argue that peasants were poorly protected against the cold and relied on sheer toughness to get through it. Others point to archaeological finds and records of layered garments, wool-lined hoods and fur-lined mittens as evidence that people had developed surprisingly effective cold weather gear. The truth, again, likely depends on your status, your region, and your personal skill at not dying. You personally are still alive, which suggests your outfit works. Barely. At home, you take off your outer layers and shake out the snow. You hang your cloak near the fire to dry, careful not to let the fur collar get singed. You warm your feet by the embers, then rub the blood back into your fingers. Everything is stiff. Everything aches, but you're not freezing, and that's something. You huddle beside your siblings, wrapping the woolen blanket tighter around all of you. Your mother knits with a speed that only comes from decades of doing it half asleep. She's working on a new pair of mittens made from unravelling an old tunic. Nothing is wasted. If it unravels, it lives again. You smile a little as you watch. Winter's cruel, yes, but you're wrapped in the labours of your own hands, in the patience of your mother's fingers, in the leftover pelts of a rabbit you once chased through the snow for hours. You're dressed like a disaster, but you're dressed for it. You've been thinking about that root cellar all day. It's like a quiet itch in your mind, just beneath the surface, nagging. You know what's in there, more or less. A few baskets of shriveled apples, a sack of onions, 2 cabbages, and the real prize, a clay jar of salted fish, crusted over with time and hope. It's not much, but in winter it might as well be a king's larder. Every time your stomach growls, it whispers the same thing. Go check the cellar again. Root cellars are as close as you come to magic down here. Not the spellcasting kind, but the dirt and stone kind. Magic that holds the line between hunger and survival. Dug deep into the cold earth, sometimes built beneath the floorboards, sometimes a separate pit nearby. These spaces are the ancient answer to refrigeration. Cold enough to slow rot, dry enough to preserve. You can't trust much in winter, but you can trust the earth. Mostly, you throw on your cloak and step outside, the wind nipping at your face, and crunch through the snow toward the covered pit behind your cottage. The door is a flat slab of wood, weighed down with stones to keep animals, or desperate neighbours, from prying it open. You glance around before lifting it. Paranoia is a winter luxury, and one you can't afford to skip. Inside, the air is sharp and still. The scent hits you first, a cold mix of earth, old roots, and a faint tang of vinegar and mould. Not exactly appetising, but familiar. Comforting, even. You step down the stone steps, knees creaking, and light a small tallow candle. The flame flickers wildly before calming, casting long shadows across the low ceiling and cobwebbed corners. You kneel by the baskets and begin your audit. The apples are turning soft, a few sporting dark spots and caved-in bruises. You can salvage most, peel away the worst and stew them down. The onions are hanging in braids from a wooden peg, still dry and good, though one bulb has sprouted a stubborn green shoot. You pop it off and toss it aside. The cabbages are holding strong, bless them. Tough things, cabbages. They don't care about cold or time or your feelings. They'll wait until spring if you let them. Then you find it. The jar of fish, salt-crusted, sealed with wax, and heavy in your hands. You exhale slowly. This is the good stuff. Caught during the last trip to the coast months ago, and salted until it could survive the apocalypse. Which, in this village, is called January. You carry the jar back inside like it's a relic, cradled in your cloak. Your siblings watch with wide eyes as you set it near the fire and begin the slow process of chipping away the wax seal. The smell escapes first. Sharp, pungent, briny. It curls through the room and triggers every stomach within 10 paces. It's awful. It's wonderful. It's food. Salted fish is a staple in this season. Not just here. Everywhere. From English villages to Scandinavian hamlets, people relied on salt preservation to survive long stretches without fresh meat. Salting wasn't just about taste. It was about life extension. Pack the fish in layers of salt, press it down, drain the liquid, repeat. If done right, it could last the whole winter, sometimes longer. Of course, done right is a flexible phrase. This fish smells like it might have missed a step. But it's too late to question it now. You peel back a fillet, slice it thin, and drop it into the stew pot with some cabbage and a hint of dried thyme. It bubbles gently over the fire, filling the cottage with a scent that makes your eyes water, but also makes you salivate. You'll eat every last bit. You always do. Let's talk preservation. The cornerstone of any medieval winter strategy. Root vegetables are obvious. They're built for storage. Potatoes, carrots, parsnips and turnips can last months in the right conditions. Cabbage keeps real too, especially when pickled into sauerkraut. Fruits get dried, meats are smoked or salted. Grains are stored in masses and guarded from pests with the desperation of a dragon hoarding gold. Pickling is more common than you'd think. Vinegar, salt brines, even fermented milk or whey. Anything acidic or funky enough to keep the bad things at bay. Is it delicious? Not usually. But after 6 weeks of boiled turnip soup, you'd punch a bishop for a pickled beet. Here's a bizarre but true historical tidbit. Some folks in Eastern Europe preserved eggs in lime water, sealing them in clay jars to keep them edible for months. The result was a slick, weird-tasting egg that no one liked, but everyone ate, because in February a weird egg is still a miracle. As for scholarly debates, there's a fascinating one around just how effective these storage techniques really were. Some historians argue that most peasants barely scraped by, with mouldy, spoiled food making up a big part of their winter diet. Others counter that peasants knew exactly what they were doing, that these people had centuries of oral knowledge and instinct and could keep food edible long past what modern assumptions might suggest. The truth likely lies in the middle. Some households nailed it, others didn't. Some winters were forgiving, others weren't. And even with all this careful preparation, things still went wrong. A damp cellar, a burst jar, a mouse invasion, a bad batch of salt, a one little error, and entire stores could be lost. That's why you check your root cellar religiously. That's why you pray over your jars and pots and sacks. Not because you're pious, because you're terrified. Dinner that night is quiet but warm. The stew is fishy and sour, but the cabbage cuts the sharpness. And the broth sticks to your ribs like hope. No one complains, not even your youngest brother, who once cried over boiled leeks. Tonight, even he eats in silence, eyes closed, bowl cradled in both hands like it's holy. You watch the candlelight dance along the beams of the ceiling, and let yourself believe, just for a moment, that you've got enough. That maybe, just maybe, you'll make it through the hungry months. You'll ration, you'll trade, you'll scavenge. And if all else fails, you've got that one secret jar of pickled onions buried in the back of the cellar. You're saving it. For a celebration, or for the worst night of all. You haven't decided yet. You wake up with a dry mouth, a pounding headache, and the faint memory of someone daring you to chug a second mug of mead last night. You did. Of course you did. Because when it's below freezing and the stew tastes like boiled rags, you need something, anything, to lift your spirit. And in the medieval village, that usually means a drink. Your head is heavy, but your blood is warm. So was it worth it? Arguably. Alcohol isn't a luxury here. It's part of survival. You drink it because the water's dodgy, the nights are long, and your nerves are threadbare. You drink it because your neighbours drink it. Because your grandfather swore by it. Because even the village priest nods approvingly when someone passes him a mug. He might grumble something about moderation, but he's never turned one down, has he? And unlike that salted fish you had last week, the ale is actually good. Not smooth exactly, not refined, but it's fresh, it's homemade, and it doesn't kill you, which puts it ahead of several other things you've consumed this month. The brewhouse is a battered shed behind the blacksmith's cottage, marked by the faint sweet scent of fermenting grain, and the occasional burst of laughter when someone inside starts sampling too early. It's warm, steamy, and filled with barrels. Barley mash bubbles in a giant cauldron, and the air smells like wet bread, sweat, and a promise. You helped make a batch once. It was simple enough. Boil grain, add herbs, let it sit, pray it doesn't grow something sentient. The hard part is patience. The rest is just instinct and timing. Your village doesn't use hops much. Those are for rich folk or townsfolk. Here, it's usually ale flavoured with groot, a mix of herbs like bog myrtle, yarrow, or rosemary. Tastes like a forest floor and makes your lips numb. Some days you thank the gods for groot, other days you suspect it's the reason your cousin went blind in one eye for a week. No one really knows. He got better, so no one's worried. Mead is rarer, a honey-based drink sweet and expensive. If someone cracks open a jug of mead, it means something big is happening. A wedding, a birth, a death, or sometimes just someone found a forgotten jar of honey at the back of a shelf and decided to become temporarily famous. That happens. Fame doesn't last long in the village, but mead stories do. Cider's another favourite. If apples were good that year. Most of the cider's on the sour side, but it still goes down easy if you're cold enough, sad enough, or pretending to be festive, which you usually are, especially by midwinter. You think about all this as you sip a watered-down ale by the fire, just enough to take the edge off your lingering headache. Your mother eyes your cup but doesn't say anything. She understands. She's already on her second. Drinking doesn't mean you're a drunk. It means you're alive in winter, and that's a pretty decent excuse for anything. Plus, alcohol gives you calories, a bit of warmth, and the illusion that you might not in fact freeze to death tonight. That illusion is worth something. Now let's talk about water, or rather, why you avoid it. In summer you boil it. In winter you avoid it altogether unless you're melting snow, and even then you're suspicious. Wells freeze, surface water stagnates, and unless you live next to a fast-running stream, which you don't, it's often safer to drink something fermented. The boiling during brewing kills most of the bad stuff, not all of it, sure, but enough probably. Here's a historical tidbit to sip on. Medieval ale wasn't like modern beer. It was much weaker in alcohol, sometimes as low as 1–2%, but because people drank it constantly, it still had a subtle, steady effect. Children drank it, pregnant women drank it, the elderly practically bathed in it. Small ale was the daily drink of choice for peasants across Europe. Water was for washing, sometimes, maybe, if you were desperate. And then there's the fringe fact for tonight. In some villages, people believed ale made during certain moon phases could either heal or curse. Brew on a waxing moon and your ale would strengthen the drinker. Brew on a waning moon and someone might lose their teeth. You once heard a story about a village where everyone went ardent for a full week because the last batch had been brewed under a blood moon. Coincidence? Maybe. But no one's brewed during a blood moon since. Scholars still argue over whether this heavy reliance on alcohol was just practical or borderline problematic. Some say medieval people were slightly buzzed all the time and it dulled their senses. Others argue that small ale wasn't potent enough to intoxicate in large doses, and that it was a smart, resourceful solution to unsafe water. Your personal experience? Somewhere in the middle. 1 mug gets you smiling, 2 mugs gets you philosophical, 3 mugs gets you singing. 4 and you're waking up face down in a snowdrift with a new scar and no memory. Tonight though, you keep it light. The wind is picking up again, and you still have to check the woodpile. You set your cup down, stand slowly, careful not to let the warmth lull you into staying seated, and head outside. The snow crunches underfoot, and your breath fogs the air like a dragon's... You smile a little. Maybe it's the ale. Maybe it's just one of those rare moments where you feel okay. Back inside, the fire is glowing. Your siblings are playing a quiet game with pebbles, and someone hums a half-forgotten tune. You sit back down and pour yourself one last mug. Not to escape, just to settle in. Just to remind yourself that warmth can come from within too. So you drink, you laugh a little, you think about the moon, the mead, the mash, and for a few precious minutes, winter feels less like an enemy, and more like an old, cold friend who occasionally brings you something sweet to sip on. The bell tolls slow and low, 3 deep oats that roll through the frost-bitten air like a warning cloaked as comfort. You stop what you're doing mid-sweep, broom still in hand, and glance toward the church tower, its steeple just visible over the line of thatched rooftops, rising like a bony finger into the winter sky. Every day the bell tolls. Morning, midday, evening. Not just for prayer, though that's what they tell you, it's for rhythm. For reminding people that time is still ticking, even when the days feel frozen in place. The church is the only building in the village made of full stone, thick and unapologetic. In a winter like this, that's both a blessing and a curse. It stays cold longer, but holds heat once warmed. You've heard people call it God's freezer, but they still go every Sunday, every Saint's Day, every time a baby's born or someone dies. In a place where nothing is guaranteed, the church stands still, and still standing is half the battle. You wrap yourself in your cloak and head toward the bell like everyone else. It's not mandatory, technically, but not going raises questions. Too many absences, and people start whispering that you've sinned, that you're hiding something, that maybe your soul's gone colder than your hearth. So you go, you always go. Inside, the church is dim. the stone walls sweating from trapped breath and incense. Candles flicker weakly along the altar, their wax pooled in little oceans of fatigue. You slide into your usual spot, beside the old woman who smells like smoked onions and devotion, and nods silently. The priest enters, wrapped in robes that look warmer than they should be. He clears his throat, raises his arms, and begins in Latin. You don't understand a word of it, but that's never mattered. You're not here for comprehension. You're here for the ritual, the repetition, the reminder that something might be listening even if it doesn't respond. Faith in winter is a strange thing. It's not bright and joyful the way the church claims it should be. It's quieter, grittier, less about divine love and more about bargaining. You pray not to freeze, you pray not to starve, you pray your brother's cough isn't the kind that ends with a shallow grave in the frozen churchyard. And sometimes, when no one's looking, you pray for less noble things, more salt, a thicker cloak, a jar of pickled eggs. People lean hard into God when the snow piles up. Not just your village, everyone. Across medieval Europe, faith was woven into winter survival. There were prayers for weather, prayers for health, prayers for mercy. If something went wrong, sick livestock, spoiled food, sudden death, it wasn't just bad luck, it was punishment. And if things went right, a miracle, proof you'd been noticed. Today's sermon is about endurance. The priest speaks in Latin, but he occasionally mutters a phrase in the common tongue. God tests us with the cold. You suppress a snort. Sure, God also tests you with that neighbour who's definitely been skimming from your firewood stack. But despite your inner sarcasm, you stay for the whole service. You kneel, you rise, you mumble the bits you remember, because there's comfort in the choreography, everyone doing the same thing at the same time, trying to convince the sky to be kind. Afterward, people linger, not for religious reflection, but because it's warmer in here than out there. The stones have soaked in the heat of 50 bodies, and for a little while it's tolerable. Plus, the church has the added benefit of not smelling like boiled cabbage and goat, unlike most homes. You chat softly with the baker's wife. She says her youngest has a fever. You both make the sign of the cross. She doesn't cry, but her eyes shine wet in the candlelight. You tell her you'll pray for him, and maybe you will, later, when you're lying in bed staring at the smoke hole and wondering if the snow will ever melt. Here's a fact worth chewing on. The medieval church wasn't just a spiritual place, it was the community hub, the centre of information, politics, and even resource distribution. If you needed food, you asked at the church. If someone died, you went to the church. If you needed to marry, confess, baptize, or bury, it was the same door every time. It wasn't just a building, it was a lifeline. And here's your weird historical wrinkle of the day. In some parts of medieval England and France, it was common to hang weather charms in the church during winter. Little wooden carvings or bits of cloth tied to saints' statues asking for milder weather, longer days, or stronger roofs. Officially, the clergy condemned it. Unofficially, some of them tied charms themselves, but there's debate among scholars about how deeply religious peasants really were. Some argue that most people followed the motions without much understanding, going along because they had to. Others believe that faith was deeply felt, intimate and constant, woven into daily survival. After all, if you live in a world where so much is out of your control, belief might be the only thing you can control. You're not sure what you believe. You light candles, you mumble prayers. You keep the little wooden charm your mother carved, a rough Virgin Mary tied with red thread, hanging above the hearth. Not because you think it works, but because not having it feels worse. You leave the church just as the clouds split open again, spilling snow like spilled flour. People scatter quickly, hoods pulled low. You head home, boots slipping on the ice-packed path, heart a little heavier than before. The priest's words ring in your ears. We suffer together and are saved together. You're not so sure about the second part. At home, your sister has cleaned the pot and is stoking the fire. She asks how the service was. You shrug. Same as always. And yet, somehow, that sameness brings comfort. In a world where every day can shift from manageable to deadly, there's peace in repetition, in lighting the same candle, singing the same song, whispering the same prayer into the cold, and you sit by the fire, hands outstretched, the warmth licking at your palms. Somewhere behind you, the bell rings again. Once, just once. Someone's died. You lower your hands, fold them in your lap, and listen to the silence that follows. Feast days are strange in the dead of winter. They sneak up on you wrapped in cold and weariness, like a visitor you forgot you invited. One minute you're scraping frost off the inside of your water jug, and the next, Your mother's telling you to wash your hands and put on your least filthy tunic because it's Saint Somebody's Day, and that means supper is going to be something. Not a miracle, but different. And in winter, different tastes a lot like joy. Today it's the feast of St. Hilary. You don't know much about Hilary except that he probably didn't spend his nights huddled in a cottage with frozen toes and a rat problem. But still, you'll celebrate him, whoever he was, because it means the normal rules bend. You'll eat better, rest longer, and maybe, if the priest is feeling bold, you'll hear music again. The whole village moves differently on feast days. The morning chores still happen, of course. Cows don't milk themselves, and firewood doesn't chop itself into neat little bundles. But there's a looseness to the day, a kind of communal exhale. People smile more. They stop to talk. The kids get excited running through the snow with sticks, pretending they're knights or saints, or both. You see your neighbour brewing something in a steaming pot outside his door and smell cloves, which makes you suspicious and jealous in equal measure. Inside your own cottage, preparations are in full swing. Your mother is stewing a rabbit that's been hidden in the back of the cold box for weeks, saved for a day like today. There are leeks, dried from the last harvest, and a few wrinkled apples getting turned into a lumpy mash. Your older sister is baking flatbread on the stone slab over the fire, and someone's found a few chestnuts that haven't gone soft. It's not a banquet, but it's so much more than the usual. You offer to help, but mostly just end up peeling onions and getting sent out to check on the fire again. That's fine. You don't need praise. You just want to eat something that doesn't taste like boiled sadness. Feast days in the medieval calendar were surprisingly frequent. Nearly 100 across the year, though not all of them came with food. Some were fast days, days of denial and grim faces, but others, like this one, broke the monotony of hunger, with a hint of celebration. You clung to them, you marked them. They were the glowing embers in the dark season. You remember last year's Feast of Candlemas when someone played a hurdy-gurdy near the fire and your uncle danced until he twisted his ankle. Or the time a passing monk brought a bundle of gingerbread from a monastery down south. You still dream about that gingerbread. It tasted like it belonged to another world. Food and ritual go hand in hand today. The priest gave a short sermon at sunrise and blessed the bread you'll eat tonight. Not that it's different from other bread, really, but it feels different. That's the point. Today's food means something. It's not just calories, it's memory. It's defiance. It's warmth in edible form. You carry the meal to the table, more of a board set over barrels, but still, and everyone gathers close. You all bow your heads, a short prayer, then the sound of spoons on bowls, of chewing of small size. No one says it, but this feels like wealth. No one rushes, the stew has flavour, the bread is warm. There's even a sliver of honeycomb pulled from storage, scraped thin across the last piece of bread like gold. There's laughter tonight. Your younger brother tells a story he overheard from the miller's son about a fox who stole a goose and tricked a whole village. It probably isn't true. Or it is, but the goose was imaginary and the fox was your cousin in disguise. Still, it makes you laugh, and that's rare enough to count as a feast of its own. Later, someone produces a battered fiddle and begins to pluck out a half-remembered melody. It's rough, like most things here, but the tune gets into your bones. You clap along, you stamp your feet. A few people try to dance, though the space is tight and the floor uneven. It's chaos, but it's joyful chaos, and for the first time in weeks, you feel almost human again. Here's a historical fact to chew on while your stew simmers. The church calendar regulated everything in a medieval village, including joy. Saints' days and feasts were spread across the year not just for spiritual reasons, but as mental and physical release valves. These moments of celebration were critical. They helped peasants endure relentless toil. Even during famine years, people would save a little something, just enough to honour the big days. Because not honouring them was unthinkable. It was like telling the sky you didn't care anymore. And here's your oddball historical nugget. In some regions, people celebrated midwinter feasts by dressing up in animal skins and singing through the streets in exchange for food or ale. Think of it as a medieval version of caroling crossed with trick-or-treating. Less about harmony, more about volume and bribes. Sometimes it was encouraged, other times it was banned. Depends on how many windows got broken and whether the reeve had a headache. But scholars argue about the real purpose of these feast days. Were they truly spiritual, or just cleverly disguised social survival mechanisms? Some say the rituals brought communities together and reinforced a shared belief system. Others think they were more about managing the psychological pressure of seasonal hardship. Maybe both, probably both. Either way, they worked. Tonight, You stay up later than usual. The fire is high, the room is warm, and you've eaten enough that your stomach isn't growling. You lean back against the wall, full in a way you haven't been for weeks. The fiddle has stopped. The stories have faded into whispers. Your mother has fallen asleep sitting up, and someone's snoring gently in the corner. Outside, the wind still howls. The snow still falls, but in here, tonight you've stolen something from winter. A few hours of light, a shared meal, a feeling that life, for all its cold and cruelty, still has room for sweetness. You lie down by the fire, curl beneath the wool blankets, and close your eyes. You dream of roasted goose and dancing foxes and honeycomb that never runs out. And when you wake, winter will still be there. Cute. But you'll have one more memory to carry through it. The pig snorts from the corner of the room, and you roll over with a groan. It's not even light out yet, and she's already shuffling around, hooves clicking softly on the packed earth floor, snuffling at your firewood pile like she's thinking about breakfast. You can't blame her, you're hungry too, but still you glare at her through half-lidded eyes and wonder. Not for the first time observed if sharing your home with livestock is truly the mark of a civilized society. But then the cold hits you. That first sharp breath, that stiff ache in your joints, that sense of, oh right, I live in a stone box made of hope and animal hair. And suddenly you're thankful for the pig. She's warm, she's alive, she gives off just enough body heat to make the difference between shivering and sleeping. Bringing animals indoors in winter isn't an act of madness, it's practicality wrapped in straw. The village calls it co-sheltering, like that makes it sound less chaotic. You call it what it is, survival with a side of stink. You throw a bit of feed toward the pig, and she settles down again with a contented grunt, curling into a lump of pink and brown. She has a name, Matilda, but no one calls her that anymore. She's just the pig. You try not to get too attached. She won't see spring. That's the plan, anyway. You sit up, brushing straw from your hair, and look around the room. It's dim, lit only by the last glow of coals and the grey press of morning through a frost-covered window. Your siblings are still asleep, bundled together under patchy wool and flattened straw mattresses. Someone's drooling, someone else is mumbling in their sleep. The goat is curled near the hearth, chewing something invisible. Yeah, it's crowded. In the summer, animals stay outside or in lean-tos or barns, but barns cost wood and labour and maintenance, and only the wealthier families have them. Everyone else makes do. In the colder months, cows, pigs, goats, chickens, whatever livestock you've got move in. They don't always behave. The goat once chewed the corner of your blanket clean off. The pig has stepped on your foot at least 3 times. And don't even ask about the time the chicken flew into the stew pot. She lived, the stew didn't. Still, it's a strange kind of companionship. The animals are noisy, sure, smelly, definitely, but they breathe, they move, they keep the silence from getting too deep. And in a season where silence starts to feel like death knocking softly at the door, even a pig's grunt is oddly reassuring. You step outside to relieve yourself, careful not to trip over the sleeping dog in the doorway. The cold slaps you awake instantly. The sky is just starting to lighten, pale grey, thick with clouds. The snow crunches underfoot, brittle and crusted. You keep your cloak wrapped tight, muttering curses through chatter and all as you hurry through your business. Back inside, you check the fire, add a log, and start the morning routine. Feed the animals, melt snow for water. See if the chicken laid anything worth calling an egg. She didn't. But you nibble a bit of leftover bread and give the pig a hard look as she nudges her snout under the blanket pile in search of warmth. You've heard some say that animals and humans shouldn't mix, that it's unclean, that it invites sickness. Maybe they're right, but clean doesn't mean much in winter. Warmth does. Warmth keeps your fingers from falling off. Warmth keeps your baby brother breathing. If that means waking up with straw in your socks and the unmistakable smell of pig in your nose, then so be it. There's an old folk saying, better a cow in the corner than cold in the grave, or it sounds nicer in your dialect with a bit of rhyme, but the meaning's the same. Practicality over pride, comfort over dignity. Still, you draw the line at the goose. She stays outside. Now here's your quirky history snack for the day. In some medieval households, pigs weren't just cohabiting, they were treated like family. Named, talked to, sometimes even dressed in scraps of cloth to keep them warm. There are stories from Germany and Scandinavia of pigs following their owners around like loyal dogs, sleeping in the same bed and occasionally sharing the same bowl. A little disturbing, sure, but tell that to someone whose pig is the only reason their kids aren't freezing. And now for the scholar baiting debate. How common really was this animal sharing practice? Some argue that the image of peasants living with pigs and goats is exaggerated, a product of later stereotypes about medieval filth and poverty. Others point to solid archaeological and textual evidence that shows animal housing within domestic spaces was routine in many rural villages, especially during winter months. The truth, as usual, varies by region, by wealth, and by desperation. You know your reality. You share your space with a pig, a goat, a chicken, and 3 people who snore like thunder. Your house smells like smoke, fur, and wet straw, and you'd be a fool to wish it any different. Midday brings a bit of warmth, just enough to make your nose stop hurting when you breathe. You go outside to gather more wood, and when you return, the pig has moved closer to the fire, occupying the very spot you wanted. You nudge her with your boot. She snorts and refuses to move. Typical. So you sit beside her instead, leaning into her warmth. She's soft and surprisingly clean, all things considered. You rest your hand on her back and feel the slow rise and fall of her breath. She smells like hay and dirt and life. For a moment you close your eyes and imagine a house with space, with doors that close, with walls that keep out the wind and animals that stay in barns. You imagine it and then you let it go, because here, in your little crowded hut surrounded by family and fur and the faint promise of another meal, you've got the most valuable thing winter can give, heat in all its forms. You rub your cold toes together, listen to the soft crackle of the fire, and lean a little harder against the pig. Spring will come, but until then, Matilda's not such a bad roommate. You can't feel your toes. Again, you think you couldn't. You vaguely remember a time, probably around Michaelmas, when you could flex them without pain, without that numb tingling that makes you question if they're still attached. But now, you walk across frozen ground, stiff and clumsy, trying not to fall on your face or lose a boot to a snowdrift, and you wonder how anyone in this village still has legs at all. The road, if you can even call it that, is a rutted mess of churned up snow and half-frozen mud. It's not the fluffy postcard kind of snow. No, this is dirty snow. Angry It's got ice underneath, patches of slush that freeze and thaw on a whim, and treacherous puddles hidden just beneath the surface. It's not white, it's grey, crusted with soot and muck from boots and animal droppings and the endless cycle of winter despair, and you're in the middle of it trying to balance a basket full of dried herbs, leftover bread, and a tin mug of, well, something warm. Probably. You've been sent to the healer's hut halfway across the village because your brother's cough has turned from concerning to, we should really do something about that before he stops breathing. And of course, this has to be the day you fall on your back, not once but twice, slipping on the same patch of black ice in front of the baker's house. You're not even embarrassed anymore. Everyone falls. It's a communal activity. Some folks use snowshoes, if they're lucky enough to have them. Mostly it's wide planks of wood strapped to boots with rope or twisted leather. You tried that once, didn't go well. Ended up face first in a pig trough. Now you stick with thick socks, straw lining, and an awkward shuffle that looks more like controlled falling than walking. And don't even ask about the carts. Wheels are useless now. Everything gets dragged on sleds, wooden contraptions dragged by human or beast across the frozen mess. You help with that sometimes. The village's old ox is half blind, and someone needs to walk beside him to keep him from wandering into the pond again. You finally reach the healer's door, knock twice, and wait. No answer. You knock again, louder. There's a rustle, a cough, and then the door creaks open to reveal an ancient woman in layers of shawls, squinting at you like she's deciding whether or not you're worth her time. "You're late," she says, even though you weren't expected. You hand her the basket. "He's coughing again," she grunts. They always are. Inside, her cottage is smoky and warm, filled with the thick smell of dried herbs and something slightly sour you don't want to investigate. Bundles of sage, thyme and yarrow hang from the rafters. A cauldron bubbles near the fire, and a black cat stares at you from the shadows like it knows something you don't. She rummages through a crate and pulls out a small linen pouch. "Boil this in water, make him drink it, morning and night." "What is it?" "Licorice root, horehound, and something I don't remember. If he turns green, stop." You nod. That's about as much reassurance as you're going to get. The healer isn't a physician. She's a survivor. She knows plants, she knows pain, and she doesn't have patience for whining. You like her. You trudge home, pouch clutched in your fist, slipping once more but catching yourself this time. The wind bites your face, your fingers are stiff and aching, and still you see others out in the cold doing what they have to do. a girl hauling a bucket of snow for melting, a boy chasing a runaway chicken across the road, an old man trying to shovel his path with a plank of wood and an admirable amount of swearing. Getting around in winter isn't just a chore, it's a threat. A broken ankle could mean starvation. A bad fall near the woods, out of earshot, could end you. That's why people walk in pairs when they can, why you yell coming through when you turn a snowy corner, why you always carry something sharp just in case. Here's a little known fact. Medieval villages didn't have regular road maintenance. Shocking, I know. But during winter, paths became impassable, trade slowed, travel stopped. Entire communities vanished into isolation. And if you had to go anywhere, you relied on sleds, snowshoes, or, if you were rich enough, horse-drawn sleighs. But most of us, we walked, slowly, painfully, frequently cursing the heavens. And now for something weirder. In certain parts of Eastern Europe, some villagers believed that winter roads were haunted by spirits, frozen souls of those who died in the snow, doomed to wander forever unless their names were spoken aloud. So people carried charms or muttered protective rhymes as they walked. You've never seen one of the spirits, but there was that one time last winter when something moaned near the woods, and you ran so fast you lost a shoe and didn't go back for 2 days. So maybe they were onto something. Historians still argue about how mobile medieval people really were in winter. Some believe villages shut down entirely, no travel, no contact, just hibernation. Others say people moved more than we think, carrying messages, visiting family, trading goods. You'd say it's both. Most folks hunkered down, but when the need outweighed the risk, they went out into the storm and took their chances. You arrive home, soaked up to the knees, and stomp the slush off your boots before stepping inside. The warmth hits you like a blessing. Your brother's curled up near the fire, pale and coughing weakly. You hand your mother the pouch and she sets to work boiling water. You peel off your outer layers, wring out your socks, and sink onto the floor exhausted. Your fingers burn as the feeling returns. Sharp little needles under the skin. You welcome the pain, it means your hands still work. The pig oinks softly, the goat sneezes, the fire crackles, and you think, tomorrow maybe, you'll stay inside. But you probably won't. Your brother's cough keeps you awake. Not the volume, he's too weak for that now, but the rhythm. It's irregular, wet and sharp, like a blade slicing the silence. He curls beside the hearth, wrapped in every scrap of fabric the family can spare, skin damp with fever, breath shallow between each fit. You lie on your side nearby, eyes open in the dark, watching the firelight flicker across his face and wondering just how much worse it'll get before it either breaks or breaks him. You've already tried everything you know. Herbal tea made with the healer's pouch, bitter, earthy, barely drinkable. A steaming cloth across his chest, wrapped in thyme and camphor. Though your supply of both is running low, you've spooned him hot broth and honey and whispered nonsense stories you barely remember from your own childhood. He's still here, but you're not sure if that's good news or just a delay. Illness in winter is different. It hits harder, lingers longer. The cold wears you down so you're already weaker when it strikes. And with so many people packed together, one cough becomes 2, becomes 5, becomes half, the village leaning over bowls of onion poultice and praying to saints they barely believe in. You've learned to tell the difference between a simple cold and something darker. The difference is in the eyes, the skin, the sound of the breathing. Your brother has that grey look now, not death grey, not yet, but close, like he's standing on a threshold, trying to decide if it's worth the effort to stay. You glance at your mother. She hasn't slept in 2 nights. She sits beside him, dipping a cloth into a clay cup and dabbing his forehead, whispering half prayers and old lullabies under her breath. She won't stop. Not until it's over one way or the other. You offer to take over and she hands you the cloth without a word. It's warm, soaked in vinegar and rosewater. You press it gently to his skin, and for a moment he looks peaceful. Then the cough returns. He curls inward, face twisting in pain, and you can't help but flinch. You've seen this before. Every winter, someone gets sick and everyone starts reaching for the healer. For garlic, for prayers. Some make it, some don't. There was a girl last year, Marta. She was 12. Took ill after falling in the river. Started with a sniffle. Ended with her wrapped in linen and buried in frozen ground. You remember the way her mother screamed during the burial. Like it wasn't just grief, but betrayal. As if the earth had promised to be kinder than this. Your brother whimpers and you place a hand on his shoulder, firm and steady. Still here, you whisper, more for yourself than him. He opens his eyes briefly, dull and glassy. "Thirsty," he rasps. You lift a cup of warm water to his lips, slow and careful. He drinks greedily at first, then starts to choke, and you have to ease him back down as the cough takes over again. You feel useless, angry, and underneath it all, scared. Illness doesn't just steal bodies. It steals hours, energy, hope. It interrupts everything. Chores go undone, meals get skipped. Firewood goes unchopped. You watch the cottage fall into slow disorder. All energy rerouted to survival. And still, there's no guarantee. You hear about other homes. The widow 2 cottages down has been coughing for days. The baker's son has blood in his phlegm. Someone says it might be the red lung, whatever that means. Nobody's using the word plague yet, but it's there, hovering like smoke, thick and unspoken. The healer still visits when she can, but her own hands are shaking now, and she smells of herbs so strong they make your eyes water. You wonder how many sick homes she's been in, how many she's left worse than when she entered. Still, she keeps going. So do you, so does everyone, because what's the alternative? Lying down and waiting for the fever to come for you too? Here's a grim historical fact to warm your soul. During the medieval period, even the common cold could kill you. Pneumonia, bronchitis, influenza, names we throw around today like minor annoyances, were often death sentences. Antibiotics didn't exist. Germ theory wasn't even a theory yet. You got sick, you drank something that tasted like boiled twigs, and then you either got better or you didn't. Most remedies were herbal. Onion, garlic, mustard seed and honey were frequent visitors to the sickbed. So were rituals, blessings, charms, chants. Some swore by bleeding, others by fasting. Still others believed that disease entered the body through bad air. So they burned herbs and carried sweet-smelling flowers. You once saw a woman shove a piece of rosemary up her nose and swear it cured her headache. It didn't, but she smelled nice for 3 days. And now for your fringe fact of the evening. Some medieval villagers believed in elf shot, the idea that sudden illness, especially those accompanied by fever or muscle pain, came from invisible arrows fired by angry elves or fairies. The only cure, special stones, secret prayers, or a good hard slap to scare the spirit out. You're not sure about elf shot, but if something's shooting arrows at your brother right now, it's not invisible. It's just winning. There's scholarly debate about whether these kinds of beliefs hindered or helped recovery. Some argue that the focus on supernatural causes delayed real treatment. Others suggest that the rituals themselves, however strange, provided structure, hope, and placebo comfort, which is sometimes enough. You've seen people recover just because they believed they would. You've seen others fade despite every herb and prayer. The line is thin, too thin. Your brother's breathing slows as the fire dims. You tuck another log onto the embers, stir the pot of broth, and sit beside him again. You wipe his forehead, whisper a song you only half remember, and tell him stories about warm summers and rivers that don't freeze and apples so ripe they burst in your mouth. He listens, eyes fluttering. Then he whispers, "Will it be spring soon?" You nod. "Very soon." It's a lie. But what else can you give him? Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. Inside, the pig grunts softly in her sleep. The world keeps turning. Barely. You sit there, cloth in hand, waiting for either silence, paw, or breath. The word arrives like frost. Quiet, sudden, and impossible to ignore. You don't hear it from the priest, or the reeve, or even the healer. You hear it from the baker's boy, shouting through the square with breath fogging from his mouth, eyes wide, face pale. "They've shut the road from Western! Too many dead!" Just like that, the air changes. No one laughs, no one even speaks. The snow doesn't seem so harmless anymore, and the cold feels sharper than it did a moment ago. You clutch your basket tighter and stand frozen, both from weather and fear, because if they're shutting roads in Western, it can only mean one thing. Plague, the Black Death, the pestilence, the murrain, the end. Whatever you call it, it's here, again, or near enough to smell it. And that's the problem with winters like this, when everyone's huddled inside, breathing the same smoky air, eating from the same wooden bowls, sharing fires, blankets and coughs. Disease spreads like spilled ink. Fast, messy and irreversible. You've lived through a plague before, not the plague. That was before your time. But another kind, just as cruel in its own quiet way. 2 years ago, the fever swept through your village like a shadow at dusk. It took 6, the midwife, a baby, the smith's wife, 3 others, no time to bury them properly, just linen and frozen ground. And then it passed like a ghost losing interest. But this feels heavier, more familiar in the stories told by old women with missing teeth and eyes that don't quite meet yours. The black one, basically, the breath stealer. You remember one saying it made people swell and burst. Another said you could catch it just by looking at someone the wrong way. You don't know what to believe. But when the baker's boy speaks, you listen. That night, no one sleeps. You gather near the hearth, the heat now feeling less like comfort and more like safety, as if flame alone might purify the air. Your brother is better, his fever broke, but now your mother worries it was a false break. She watches him constantly, hand on his forehead, lips moving in silent prayer. Your sister sharpens the kitchen knife because she doesn't know what else to do, and you sit with your back against the door as if you could keep plague out by sheer willpower. The priest visits the next day, his face grave, his voice calm. It hasn't reached us yet, he says, but it's coming. We must just prepare. You ask what that means. He doesn't answer. Instead, he gives each household a sprig of dried rosemary tied with red thread. Hang it above your hearth, he instructs. The scent will purify the air. You nod. Not because you believe him, but because not nodding feels dangerous. The next few days are a blur of preparation and paranoia. People begin lighting extra fires, filling their homes with pungent herbs, lavender, rue, mint, anything that smells stronger than sickness. The healer mixes a foul-smelling vinegar tincture and dabs it behind her ears. She tells you to do the same. You obey, even though it stings and makes you smell like a pickled onion. The church bell rings more often now, not just for prayer, but for death one chime, then another, then 2 in one day, and still, there's work to do. Animals to feed, firewood to cut, meals to stretch thinner and thinner. The fear doesn't stop the routine, it just soaks into it, making every motion feel heavier. You hear the stories, that someone in a nearby hamlet coughed once, then bled from the eyes, that a family in the north barricaded themselves inside and never came out, that the Lord's steward refuses to enter the village now and throws down orders from horseback, face wrapped in a cloth soaked in rosewater. Here's your unsettling historical fact for the evening. During plague times, people often wore plague posies, small bundles of herbs tied around their necks, tucked into their belts, or clutched in hand, to protect against bad air, which they believed carried the disease. The idea wasn't entirely foolish. Some herbs did have mild antibacterial properties, but of course they weren't nearly enough to stop what was coming. And here's your wonderfully strange one. In some regions, people believe that onions cut in half and left in the corners of a room could absorb the sickness. You tried that once during a flu scare. The onion shriveled. You got better. Coincidence? Probably. But you've kept the habit. There are 2 onions in the corners of your cottage right now, drying into wrinkled little sentries. But here's the real debate scholars can't stop chewing on. Did winter help slow the plague, or did it make it worse? Some say the cold kept people indoors, which increased exposure and infection. Others argue that the flea and rat populations, the real villains, slowed in the frost, buying time. There's evidence for both. But in the end, the season didn't matter as much as proximity. The closer you were to others, the more likely you were to die. And in a village like yours, proximity is unavoidable. So you do what you can. You scrub the floor, you scrub your hands, you sprinkle vinegar on the windowsill and mutter protective rhymes you don't really believe. You burn sage and sweetgrass. You try not to breathe too deeply around anyone who sneezes. When someone dies now, you don't gather. The body is wrapped quickly, buried quickly. No bells, no funerals, no risk. You're not sure what's worse, the fear of dying or the fear of dying alone. One night, lying beside your now sleeping brother, you hear the wind shift. It howls lower now, as if it's carrying whispers. Maybe it's just your imagination. Or maybe it's the sound of something already here, creeping under doorways, clinging to breath, biding its time. You clutch your rosemary tighter and try to dream of spring. But all you see are dark roads and red thread charms. The children wake you first, laughing, of all things, real laughter. Bright and reckless, the kind you almost forgot existed. For a moment you think you're dreaming, that maybe you've slipped back into summer somehow, that warmth and colour have returned to the world. But then you open your eyes, and it's still winter. The same grey light seeps through the cracks in the wall. The same frost rims the window frame. but your younger siblings are awake and moving, cheeks pink, hands sticky with something suspiciously sweet. You sit up groggily. "What are you eating?" "Snow," your sister says, grinning with a mouthful. "Snow?" "With honey," she adds proudly, holding out a lump that looks like dirty ice mashed into a ball. "Mama said we could, just the hunts." You blink, still half asleep, then realise you're smiling. For the first time in days, the air feels lighter. Your brother's fever broke for good 2 nights ago, and though he's thin and tired, he's breathing easy again. The shadow that hung over the house has lifted a little. Outside, the air is biting, but the sun, yes, actual sunlight, has returned for the first time in a week. The sky is pale blue, the snow sparkling instead of sulking. You pull on your boots and step outside to fetch water. The village is stirring cautiously. A few doors open, someone sweeping snow from their threshold, someone else chopping wood. You hear a baby cry, a sharp, healthy sound, and for a moment, life feels stubborn again, like it refuses to quit. The children, though, have no patience for caution. They've turned the narrow path between cottages into their own adventure ground. They run barefoot on straw-wrapped feet, kicking snow and chasing one another, ignoring the cold entirely, their little lanterns in the gloom, reminding everyone what joy used to sound like. You watch them, arms crossed, pretending not to smile too much. Childhood doesn't stop for winter. It adapts. They still play, still find things to laugh about. Ice crystals shaped like faces, snowdrifts that look like sleeping monsters, icicles that could double as swords. You used to do the same. You still would, maybe, if you weren't so busy being the one who has to worry. Children work here too. Of course, everyone does. By the time they can walk, they've got jobs. Feeding chickens, gathering kindling, carding wool, keeping the fire alive while the adults are out. Your sister, who's 8, can already milk a goat and scold it at the same time. Your brother, who's 10, used to chop wood until the cough took him down. Now he sits near the fire mending a torn boot with concentration that makes him look 40. It's easy to forget they're still children until they start laughing like that. You remember what it felt like. Bare hands, red with cold, breath sharp in your lungs, snowball fights that turned into all-out wars, and the thrill of not feeling your fingers but not caring. The joy of stealing a few minutes out still before someone yelled at you to get back in. You remember how even hunger could be a game, how your friends used to pretend their empty bellies were monsters that needed feeding by snow cakes and imaginary feasts. Survival looked like play back then. Maybe that's why you survived at all. Inside, your mother's making porridge. The smell isn't exactly delightful, boiled grain and water rarely are, but it's familiar, and it fills the air with comfort. You sit by the fire, warming your hands. Your sister skips inside, breathless and grinning, and starts rattling off stories about her adventures. She saw a bird on the church roof. She found a patch of moss still green under the snow. She swears she saw the tracks of a fox, but maybe it was an angel. Your mother just nods and smiles. She doesn't correct her. You don't either. Let her have angels. Here's a solid historical fact to tuck away. Medieval children weren't entirely the voiceless, joyless figures history sometimes paints them as. Yes, they worked early, endured hardship and often didn't live long, but they played. Archaeologists have found carved toy horses, clay dolls, even miniature wooden swords and dice in village ruins. Kids made toys out of whatever they had. Bones, sticks, pebbles, and they made fun out of what wasn't meant to be fun. Laughter was cheap, which made it priceless. And here's a slightly weirder one. In some regions, especially Northern Europe, children were thought to carry luck during winter. People believed their laughter could ward off evil spirits or sickness. So on certain cold nights, families would encourage their youngest to sing, dance, or just make noise to wake up the warmth. You think about that now, hearing your siblings chatter, and for once you almost believe it. Maybe joy really does burn hotter than firewood. As for historians, they debate endlessly whether medieval parents truly loved their children or merely tolerated them until they could work. Some say affection was limited, dulled by high mortality rates. Others argue the opposite, that love burned fiercer precisely because death was close. The evidence? Letters, lullabies, small graves lined with flowers, even in midwinter. You've seen that last one with your own eyes. You don't need scholars to tell you how deep love goes when everything else is brittle. The day fades into its pale winter dusk. You spend the afternoon mending a cracked bucket while the children nap by the fire. Later, when night falls, your brother stirs awake and asks for a story. You oblige, You tell him about a prince who lived in a glass castle and fought the cold itself with a sword made of sunlight. He listens, eyes wide, coughing only a little. When you finish, he smiles. Did he win? You shrug. Still fighting? He nods solemnly, like that's the right answer. Maybe it is. Outside, the snow glows faintly under a half moon. Inside, your home is filled with the soft breathing of children and the faint grunt of the pig in her sleep. The air is still cold, yes, but lighter. Warmer somehow, just from the sound of them. You lie awake a little longer, watching their small faces in the flickering firelight and think, maybe surviving winter isn't just about wooden food. Maybe it's about remembering how to laugh in the middle of it. You close your eyes, the laughter lingers. The days blur now. One snow-covered morning bleeds into the next like ink spilled across a page you're too tired to turn. You wake, you work, you eat if there's food and sleep if the fire holds. But today is different. Because today you have nothing to do. No wood to chop, no pots to scrub, no snow to shovel from the roof. And for the first time in weeks, no one is sick, dying or crying. You sit by the hearth and stare at your hands. They look like someone else's, raw, cracked, dark with soot and calloused, until the skin barely feels like skin anymore. You flex your fingers and listen to the tiny pops in your joints. No pain, just stiffness. A reminder that your body is like the rest of the village. Alive, but only just. It's the middle of winter. The deep middle. The part where the fields are useless and the animals sleep more than they graze. The part where your days used to be full of ploughing, sowing, herding, but now you're just waiting. You look around the room. Everyone's still bundled up in corners, stirring slowly like they're waking from dreams that were warmer than reality. The fire is burning, but lo, the stew pot is empty. The snow is still falling. You sigh. Then, with the kind of determination only boredom can bring, you stand up. You decide to make something. Your fingers dig through the household basket of half-finished projects. A frayed rope, a chipped spindle, a few broken combs. You pull out your wool scraps and a clumsy hand-whittled needle. Knitting isn't your strongest skill, but it's repetitive, meditative. You can do it half asleep, and honestly, most winters you have. You start threading the wool into something vaguely sock-shaped, even though you know it'll probably end up too lumpy to wear. Doesn't matter, that's not the point. When the land is frozen and the world is locked in grey, you create something to remind yourself that your hands still work, and your mind still matters. Idle hands, people say, are the devil's tools. And that's true, do you suppose? Though some villagers would argue idle hands are just frozen ones. But there's a different danger in stillness during winter. Not mischief, madness. Too much silence, too much waiting, too much nothing can eat a person from the inside out faster than any illness. That's why winter is also the season of crafts. Everyone becomes a maker. Your father, who barely speaks most days, is carving new handles for the kitchen knives. Your cousin spends hours twisting lengths of twine into fishing net repairs for a boat that won't hit water until May. And your sister? She's been working on a single embroidered flower on a square of linen for 3 years. Every winter she adds one stitch. Maybe it'll be finished by the time she's married, or dead, whichever comes first. You pick up your pace, looping yarn over your needle. The sock begins to take shape. Lopsided shape, sure, but shape. You can hear the soft hum of your mother spinning thread at her wheel, the squeak of the foot treadle, the whisper of fibre pulling into string. She does it without thinking now. Her hands have muscle memory, passed down from her mother's mother, who probably spun by candlelight while watching wolves creep past the window. Because of course, in the old days, winter crafts weren't hobbies. They were lifelines. Clothes had to be mended, blankets woven, tools repaired. The hours spent indoors weren't wasted. They were banking comfort for the rest of the year. Here's a good old-fashioned historical nugget to wrap your yarn around. In medieval Europe, winter was the designated season for home-based labour. Weaving, spinning, carving, tanning, basket making, tool sharpening, even brewing. If it didn't require fields or travel, it happened in the winter. Whole families would gather around the hearth, each with their own task. Quiet, industrious, focused. Not because they were pious or wholesome, because they were cold and had time. And here's your weird fact of the night. In some parts of rural Germany, it was considered bad luck to leave a spinning wheel idle during winter. People believe that if you didn't keep it moving, restless spirits would come and spin misfortune into your home. You never met a spirit, but you've seen what boredom can do to a house full of tired people. Honestly, same result. There's a debate among scholars about how peasants truly spent their winters. Were they hibernating like bears, conserving calories and doing only what was strictly necessary? Or were they surprisingly productive, using every moment to prepare for spring? The answer seems to be both. Some winters left people too weak to do more than exist. Others, if the stores were decent and the weather wasn't murderous, gave people time to breathe, to make, to fix. Today feels like one of those rare days. You finish your sock, it's horrible. The toe is tight, the heel is bunched, and one side has a mysterious hole that wasn't there 5 minutes ago. You hold it up triumphantly anyway. Your brother claps sarcastically. You made a pouch? You throw it at his head. He laughs, a dry little chuckle that makes you feel warmer than the fire does. Then he picks up his own project, an old piece of wood he's been carving into a spoon. It's too thick, he'll never use it. But he whittles anyway, tongue poking out between his teeth, focused like a monk copying scripture. You smile and go back to your next sock. Maybe this one will be better. The light fades early. You light the candles, 2 of them, one tallow, one beeswax for the table, and settle in for another quiet night. The cottage is still, filled only with the sounds of soft carving, quiet spinning, and the gentle clack of your knitting needles. Winter is long, but this moment is short, peaceful, even hopeful. You think maybe you'll make a matching pair this time. The howling starts just after sunset. Not the wind this time, not the usual groaning through trees or whistling past thatched roofs. This sound is different. Low, guttural, rising sharp and sudden before tapering into something that doesn't quite end so much as... Wait. You freeze. Halfway through stirring the evening stew, if you can call salted turnips and 2 dried beans a stew, you grip the wooden spoon tighter and tilt your head toward the sound. There it is again. A long, mournful call from the edge of the woods, distant but close enough to quicken your pulse. Wolves, Bo, your sister says from her spot near the hearth, voice flat. She doesn't even look up. You nod slowly. You knew it would happen eventually. It always does. When winter stretches on, when the snow keeps falling and the deer disappear deeper into the forest, when the rivers freeze and the birds are gone, they come. Desperate, skinny, bold. Wolves that usually stick to the hills begin wandering into farmland, sniffing for pigs, chickens, sheep. Anything that breathes and bleeds. They don't care if it's in a pen or in a barn or on the end of a rope. They're starving, just like you. You put the spoon down and grab the iron poker from beside the hearth. It's not much, but it's long and sharpish, and it has just enough weight to be comforting. Your mother does the same. She reaches for the old wood axe, the one that barely splits logs anymore but has a presence about it. Everyone gets quiet. The stew still bubbles, the fire still crackles, but something in the air has shifted. You step outside into the brittle dark, snow creaking beneath your boots. The wind bites your face. The moon, just a sliver above the trees, spills pale silver light across the village paths, and then you hear it again, closer, another howl, then another, shorter, overlapping. That one wasn't far at all. You don't see them yet, but you know they're there, watching. You scan the tree line at the far end of the pasture, your eyes darting across the shadows. It's quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your neck itch. You check the animal pen. The goat and pig are safe inside the house, thankfully. The chickens, huddled in their makeshift coop, are wide awake and rustling nervously. You move toward the coop, poker raised, ready to swing if anything moves the wrong way. But it's fine, for now. From the cottage across the way, the blacksmith emerges, torch in hand. He doesn't say anything, just meets your eyes and nods once. You nod back. There's no plan, no words, just assent agreement. Tonight, we guard. You return inside. The warmth slaps you in the face like a blessing. You shut the door firmly, wedge a log against it, and listen. They'll test the edges first, your mother says. See if anything's easy. And if it is, your brother asks, they take it. Everyone sleeps light that night, or pretends to sleep anyway. You stay near the fire, poker beside you, wrapped in a blanket that smells like smoke and wool, and every night you've ever spent wishing you were somewhere warmer. The howling comes and goes. Sometimes it sounds far, sometimes not. Wolves are a part of winter, just like hunger and firewood and patchy socks. You've never seen one up close, but you've seen what they leave behind. A shredded hen, a torn boot, once a trail of blood that led from the pen straight into the woods and stopped where the snow was too trampled to tell which direction was which. And here's a harsh historical fact. Wolf attacks weren't just tales to scare children. In colder, hungrier centuries, real records document wolves entering villages, raiding livestock, and occasionally horrifyingly outmatching unattended children or the sick. France, Eastern Europe, Russia, whole regions kept track of winters by the number of wolf sightings. And when snow was deep and game was scarce, even mouse humans weren't off the menu. In the far north, people told stories of the winter wolf, a beast that only appeared during the cruelest months. They said its eyes glowed blue, its breath froze the ground, and it walked on two legs when the moon was high. You don't believe that. But you also don't want to go look, just in case. There's debate among historians about how common wolf attacks really were. Some claim the fear was exaggerated, stoked by superstitions and the church's desire to frame nature as a dangerous, untamed force needing divine protection. Others say the records don't lie, and that wolves, while not malicious, did what all starving things do. They came for the easy meal, and sometimes that was you. Around midnight, something scratches at the door, not a knock, not a claw swipe, just a scrape. You freeze. Everyone else does too. You hold your breath, poker gripped so tight your knuckles ache. The pig lifts her head and snorts softly. The goat bleats once, low and uneasy. Another scratch, your mother rises slowly, axe in hand. You move with her, and then nothing. No crash, no bark, no howl, just silence again, thick and awful. She pulls the door open fast. You raise the poker. The wind rushes in, scattering ash and loose straw, but the porch is empty. Tracks in the snow, yes, but already half filled in. Could have been a fox, could have been worse. She closes the door and bolts it. You both return to your seats, backs to the wall, eyes on the hearth. The fire has burned low, but it's still there. You don't sleep, not really. By morning, the snow outside is clean and undisturbed. No sign of visitors, no missing chickens. But a part of you knows they were close, that they'll come again. Because winter doesn't just test your hunger or your patience, it tests your walls. And if they crack, if your defences slip for one night, someone else will slip in. There's something about firelight that makes stories seem truer than they probably are. You sit cross-legged near the hearth, the last log crackling under the iron pot, and listen as your grandfather begins yet another tale, his voice low and scratchy, rising and falling with the rhythm of someone who's told this story 100 times and intends to tell it 100 more. Your siblings are all gathered close, eyes wide, breaths held. Even the goat has stopped chewing to listen. You think she likes the scary parts. Tonight's story is about a woman made of frost. She comes, he says, when the snow is deepest. She floats over rooftops like mist, and if she finds your fire's gone out, if she sees no smoke curling from your chimney, she presses her fingers to the window. He lifts his hand, slow and deliberate, letting the light cast long, knotted shadows across the wall. And if you see her face, pale as moonlight, teeth like icicles, you're already gone. Next morning, they'll find you frozen, curled up in bed like a child. You're not sure you believe in the frost woman. But you make a mental note to check the fire at least 3 more times tonight. These stories, they're everywhere. Every family has them. The miller's wife tells one about a beast that lives under the snow, dragging away anyone who walks alone at night. The healer swears she once treated a man who was chased by wolves but swore it wasn't wolves at all, just shadows with teeth. And the priest, when he's had too much ale, mutters about demons that ride the wind during the long nights, slipping into houses through cracks no one notices until it's too late. No one says these things in daylight. But at night, huddled close to the fire, with darkness pressing against the walls like a thing alive, stories slip out like smoke. They aren't just entertainment, they're survival tools in disguise. The old tales teach you where not to go, what not to do. Don't whistle after dark, don't walk past the churchyard during a snowstorm, don't let the fire die out. Don't sleep with your feet pointing toward the door, don't look too long into the woods, even if you think you see someone waving. They're rules wrapped in rhythm, warning softened by rhyme. You're not immune. Even now, part of you glances at the dark corners of the cottage as your grandfather's tale winds toward its final terrifying moment. You feel the air grow colder, even though the fire's still strong. You swear something creaks outside, maybe just a tree branch, but maybe not. Your sister clutches your arm and whispers, "She's not real." right? You hesitate a moment too long. Course not, you say. It's just a story. But you still glance at the window. Here's a solid historical bite to chew on. Storytelling was a major part of winter life in medieval villages. With long nights and little else to do, oral tradition thrived by firelight. Folk tales, legends, family histories, even bawdy jokes and riddles were passed down not just for amusement, but as the fabric of memory. In a world without books for most people, stories were the books, spoken, lived, remembered. And here's your slightly offbeat nugget for the night. In some parts of Europe, especially the far north, people believed winter was the thin time, when the veil between the living and the dead wore thin, and spirits wandered more freely. They'd tell stories not just to pass the time, but to protect themselves. Stories about witches who came down chimneys, or house spirits who would keep the fire going if you left them a bowl of milk. Harmless, maybe, but no one skipped the milk, just in case. There's debate, of course, about whether medieval people really believed these things, or whether the stories were just tradition. Some scholars think they were pure allegory, metaphors for disease, starvation, death. Others argue they were deeply believed, as real as the weather or the wolves. You tend to think belief isn't all or nothing, it's a sliding scale, especially when it's freezing and something just tapped the window. After the story ends, your grandfather leans back, satisfied, and pokes at the fire with a stick. Your younger brother whispers, "Tell another," but the old man shakes his head. "Tomorrow," he says, "let the fire keep this one company tonight." You sit in silence for a while. The room feels full now, like the story hasn't ended, just curled up in the shadows, watching with frost-bitten eyes. You glance at the window again. Still nothing. You bank the fire carefully, adding one of your best logs, tucking it in like a baby. You're not afraid. Not really. But the cold feels sharper now, the darkness heavier. And when you lay down beside your siblings, you keep the blanket pulled up to your chin and your toes far from the edge. Stories live in winter. They nest in your hearth, your beds, your bones. You carry them with you, not just for company, but for armour, for meaning. As you drift off to sleep, the wind groans outside and someone's snoring softly. You wonder if the frost woman is real. And if she is, maybe she only visits the houses where people have forgotten how to tell stories. Yours is safe then, for now. The mill has frozen. Again. You hear the news before you see it, shouted by a red-faced boy sliding down the main path on barely wrapped feet, arms flailing like he's about to take flight. "The wheel's stuck!" he cries. "Grain's not grinding!" And just like that, the village shifts. Everyone looks up. Every head turns. Half-full baskets pause in mid-lift. Firewood piles get left in the snow. You don't need to ask what it means. You already know. You bundle yourself quickly, wool cloak, leather boots, gloves that do absolutely nothing but make you feel like you tried, and join the growing crowd heading toward the mill. It sits at the edge of the village, nestled beside the stream that snakes its way down from the hills. In spring and summer, that stream is a friend, a humming, bubbling lifeline that turns the great wooden wheel and keeps the flour flowing. But in winter, it turns against you. You reach the mill and find the door already open. The wheel is still. No creaking, no splashing, no rhythmic groan of water meeting wood. Just silence. The stream is frozen solid, thick ice creeping up around the paddles like a hand slowly closing into a fist. You tap the ice with a stick. It's hard. Not the thin crackling stuff from the early frost. This is the real kind. Deep, mean. Inside, the miller is muttering to himself, surrounded by sacks of half-ground grain and clouds of frigid flour dust. He's wrapped in so many layers he looks like a walking sack himself. His nose is red, his hands are blue, and he's already swearing. You don't blame him. No stream, no wheel. No wheel, no grinding, no bread. The real panic hasn't started yet. That'll come tonight, when the fires burn low and stomachs growl and someone realises their last loaf has gone dry as bone. For now, people grumble and offer advice. Someone suggests pouring hot water on the ice. Someone else suggests smashing it with an axe. You watch the miller's face tighten with the effort of not telling everyone to leave and let him scream into a bag in peace. You help him try, of course. Everyone does. That's how it works. One person's problem becomes everyone's when the food supply is involved. You chip at the ice with shovels and picks. Pour buckets of water over it in the faint hope that warmth still exists as a concept. But it's no use. The cold has sunk too deep. The stream isn't just frozen, it's asleep. Back home, the mood is tense. Your mother immediately checks the flour bin, like maybe it's secretly refilled itself out of guilt. It hasn't. You have enough for a day, maybe 2, if you stretch it with oat husk or dried peas, and you will, of course. You always do. That night the village is unusually quiet. No one visits, no one lingers. You hear someone chopping wood long past dark, probably trying to keep the stove burning long enough to make flatbread from whatever scraps they have left. Your own dinner is thin. Barley broth with a piece of bread so tough you could probably use it to patch a hole in the roof. You eat it anyway, slowly, gratefully. Food is never just food in winter, it's security. It's proof you're still managing. The flour in your bin, the loaf on your table, even the crumbs left on your plate. They're all symbols of victory. And now that victory's under threat from something as mundane and cruel as ice, you know the history, everyone does. There have been winters where the mill froze for weeks, bread ran out, people boiled bark, roasted roots, ground acorns and weeds into bitter paste. You heard one story about a woman who ground up her leather apron and tried to cook it. She didn't die, but she never smiled again. And then there's that one story, the one no one tells too loud. About the village, 3 days' walk from here. About how their grain ran out and the snow didn't melt and someone went missing. Then another. And how later a traveller swore he saw a bone in the stew pot. You don't believe it, but you also don't laugh. Here's a grim little fact from the record books. In the harshest winters, grain shortages weren't just inconvenient, they were catastrophic. Grain was your staple. Bread was your daily companion, your calorie lifeline. And without the mill, grinding by hand became slow, painful, and often ineffective. Most households had querns, those heavy circular hand mills, but using them was backbreaking, and if your grain was coarse or frozen, you'd spend hours just to make one sad little loaf. And here's a weird one. In some parts of Europe, people believed that if the mill froze, it meant the river spirit was angry. Offerings would be left by the stream, coins, bits of bread, sometimes even hair or fingernails to appease it. You once saw your aunt throw a crust of rye into the ice and whisper something in the old tongue. You asked what she was doing. She said, "Just in case." Historians go back and forth on whether these rituals had any real cultural weight or were just superstition layered over desperation. Some argue that such practices were symbolic acts of hope, a way to exert control over nature when none actually existed. Others think they were community-building tools, shared beliefs that gave people a reason to gather, to try, to pretend something out there might be listening. You're not sure, but when you pass the frozen stream the next morning and see 3 small loaves sitting on the ice, carefully placed and already frosting over it, you feel something in your chest twist. You head home and spend an hour grinding grain with the old quernstone, arms aching, breath fogging in the cold air. Your sister joins you halfway through, taking turns, singing an old working song that barely has words anymore. You don't ask if she believes it helps, you just sing with her. That evening, your family eats flatbread made from yesterday's flour, bulked out with wild onion and dried turnip. It's chewy, almost bitter, but it's warm. The mill will thaw eventually. It always does. But until then, you ration, you barter, you improvise, you survive. Because winter doesn't just freeze rivers, it freezes everything, progress, routine, even hope. And your job every day is to chip away at it with whatever you've got left. Even if all you've got is a song and a stone. The knock comes after dark, and not the polite kind. It's fast and hard and urgent, rattling the old door so fiercely you nearly drop the spoon you're using to stir what can only generously be described as soup, mostly hot water. A few chopped turnips, and the last of last week's salt. You freeze. Everyone in the house freezes. Even the pig stirs in her corner, letting out a low grunt of disapproval. Your mother gives you a look, not fear exactly, but something close, that quiet, tight expression that says, "Don't open it unless you have to." You grab the iron poker anyway, your new favourite tool of the season, and move toward the door. Another knock, louder. Then a voice muffled and tense. "Open up, please." A man's voice, sharp with cold, not from your part of the village. You hesitate, hand on the wooden latch, heart thumping. Your mother's already on her feet now, holding the axe. You crack the door open a few inches, just enough to peek outside. 2 figures stand in the snow, one tall, one small. The man's face is wrapped in a cloth, eyes darting. Behind him, A younger boy, no more than 10, hunched and shivering under a threadbare cloak. Neither of them you recognise. The man speaks again, fast. "We're travellers, from north of the ridge. The pass is blocked. We've nowhere else." Your mother is suddenly at your shoulder. She pushes the door open wider, assessing the pair like a butcher inspecting meat. Then slowly she steps aside. "Come in, but keep your hands where I can see them." They do. The man nods, relief all over his face, and ushers the boy forward. Snow clings to their boots and cloaks, melting quickly into puddles on the packed earth floor. The pig grunts again, unimpressed by the new arrivals. You make space near the fire, offer them a seat, and watch as the boy crumples to the floor, legs giving out. He's exhausted, blue-lipped and trembling. The man crouches beside him, rubbing his arms. "Been walking since dawn," he says. "We're not thieves." Your mother gives him a look that says, "We'll see." You hand them each a cup of soup, thin but hot, and watch them drink like it's the finest feast they've ever had. The boy doesn't even stop to breathe. They're hungry, frozen, desperate, and desperate is dangerous. Bandits love a snowstorm. That's what your grandfather always says. Not because it makes travel easier, it doesn't, but because snow hides everything. Footprints, campfires, blood. Villages like yours are vulnerable when the snow is heavy and the nights are long. Outsiders blend in with the cold. They knock like travellers, smile like pilgrims, and sometimes leave you with less than you started. But not always. Not everyone is a threat. And that's the winter gamble, isn't it? Knowing when to help and when to bolt the door, you sit quietly as the man explains. Their home was deeper in the hills, a small place, too small to last a winter like this. Their food ran out. The boy's mother died in December. They buried her in the snow, he says flatly. Then they left. The man doesn't cry, but he stares into the fire like someone who's seen too much. You believe him, mostly, but you don't put the poker down. The boy falls asleep by the fire, still clutching his empty bowl. Your sister tucks a blanket over him without being asked. Your mother sits across from the man, still watching, still silent. You make extra tea, dried mint and a scrap of honey your last bit, and pass it around. You sleep with one eye open. In the morning they help with chores. The man chops wood like someone who's done it 1,000 times. The boy feeds the goat, laughing when it snatches hay from his hands. There's something in your chest that loosens, just a little. Maybe they're not dangerous, maybe they're just tired. But the village doesn't forgive quickly. When word spreads that you took in strangers, people stop talking when you pass. No one says it to your face, but the message is clear. That was a risk you shouldn't have taken. Still, when the man offers to leave that night, your mother shakes her head. "Not in this weather." He nods, grateful, but you can see the shame in it too. The weight of depending on the kindness of others, knowing it might run out any minute. Here's a real historical gut punch for you. Winter wasn't just hard on locals, it was lethal for travellers. Wayfarers, traders, pilgrims, all found themselves at the mercy of roads that vanished under snow, rivers that iced over, and villages that weren't always welcoming. Some carried travel tokens from churches, hoping the Holy Seal would earn them shelter. Others travelled with musicians or jugglers to trade performance for porridge, but many simply vanished in the snow. And here's the strange bit. In certain parts of medieval Europe, there were laws of winter hospitality. Some regions believed that turning away a traveller during a blizzard brought a curse, that the gods, or saints, or even spirits might disguise themselves as wanderers to test your kindness. You've heard your own mother say it, you never know who's knocking. That's why she opened the door, not for the man, for the chance it might have been someone else. There's some scholarly debate on whether this kind of winter hospitality was truly widespread or more myth than practice. Some think it was romanticised by later storytellers. Others point to legal codes and church records that mention fines for refusing aid to the vulnerable during storms. Whether law or law, the expectation was there. Help or risk something worse than cold. 3 days later, the man and boy are still with you. They've earned their keep. He's repaired 2 buckets and your mother's axe, and the boy helped your brother dig out the chicken coop. They don't take more than they need. They even gave back the blanket. On the 4th morning they leave. Not because they're asked to, but because pride is a powerful thing even in winter. You pack them food, half a loaf, some dried root, a pinch of salt, and wave as they walk into the dawn, the snow crunching beneath their feet. The boy turns to wave back. You wave too. You never see them again. Maybe they found another village. Maybe spring came early where they went. Maybe they didn't make it. but you remember them. And when the next knock comes, and it will come, you'll remember the warmth they left behind, and maybe you'll open the door, just a crack. It starts snowing again in the afternoon. Big, slow flakes that drift more than they fall, like they're taking their time about it. You're outside chopping kindling, sleeves stiff with old sweat and frost, when you notice how the flakes stick to your cloak and shoulders like lint, then melt away just as silently. The air's warmer somehow. Not warm exactly, but not painful. You sniff, damp, the snow is wet, heavy. A change is coming. You look up and see your mother standing at the doorway, shielding her eyes with one hand. She smells it too. It's not spring, not yet, but the wind's shifted, and with it, your village starts stirring in the strangest way. Because this isn't just snow, this is thaw snow, which means opportunity, and also disaster. By the next morning, the village is unrecognisable. The rooftops sag under the weight of slush. The paths are ankle-deep in half-frozen water. The dirt is no longer frozen hard, but slick and sticky, clinging to boots and hems, and any animal dumb enough to wander. You step out of the house and your foot sinks straight into cold mud, almost losing your shoe. You swear loudly. Everyone does. It's practically a rite of passage. The snow that insulated your world for months is now turning on you, melting into every crevice, dripping through every thatch seam, sliding off roofs with wet, thudding crashes. Your cousin's roof caved in last night. The whole family is now sleeping into the old granary, sharing space with a crate of spoiled turnips and a chicken with a nervous twitch. At first glance, the thaw is a relief. It means winter is loosening its grip. It means maybe, just maybe, things are changing. But it also means flooding, disease, and a new round of hard labour. You set to work early, trying to dig a trench to drain the yard, your shovel sloshing through what feels like soup with bits of grass in it. The snowmelt is relentless, pooling in low places, freezing again at night, making the village a patchwork of sludge and hidden ice. It's treacherous. One wrong step and you're on your back in the mud, which happens to the Reeve that afternoon in front of the entire village. He gets up swearing and limping. No one helps him, but everyone laughs, quietly, behind hands. The animal pens are a disaster. The chicken coop smells like wet feathers and regret. The goat stands on a dry spot of straw like a queen in exile, glaring at the rising puddles. And Matilda the pig, she's found the highest corner of the pen and refuses to move, her entire face covered in sludge. You spend most of the morning bailing water and muttering curses at the sky. Food stores don't fare much better. Moisture gets into the root cellar. A sack of barley has gone mouldy. You scrape off the green parts and hope for the best. The smoked meat is still intact, but the drying herbs are limp and sad-looking, hanging like wet rags above the stove. And then there's the real problem, the waste. For months, everything froze. You dumped your chamber pot in the same snowbank behind the house. You tossed scraps, buried spoiled food, let nature handle it. But now all of that is melting, flowing, mixing. The air turns foul. The stream down the hill, which was once a slow, babbling trickle beneath the ice, now runs fast and brown. And that's when the sickness returns. It starts with the boy who lives near the mill. Fever, cold, cramps, vomiting. Then the old woman next door. Then 2 more children. You hear whispers. It's the water. It's the melting. The healer says it's bad humours stirred up by the change of season. She gives out charcoal and elderflower tea and tells everyone to boil their water, if they can spare the firewood. You go home and boil everything. Water for drinking. Water for washing. Water just in case you even think about using it for something important. The stew is made with snowmelt that's been boiled for half an hour, and it still tastes like fear. Here's a grim historical truth for you. The thaw didn't just bring mud, it brought disease, cholera, dysentery, typhoid. Things we barely think about now were constant threats as the snow melted and revealed months of built-up waste. Wells got contaminated, streams became deadly, and once sickness started, it spread fast through people already weakened by winter. And here's the slightly bizarre fact of the day. In some medieval communities, people held thaw festivals, not to celebrate the end of winter, but to appease it. They believed the transition from winter to spring was a dangerous liminal time, when spirits were restless and boundaries between the living and the dead thinned. Offerings were made, bread buried in mud, ash spread in doorways, garlands left in snowmelt puddles. You don't do that in your village anymore, but part of you wonders if you should. Scholars argue over whether these rituals were religious or just psychological survival mechanisms. After all, watching the land go from frozen stasis to filthy chaos overnight could rattle anyone's sense of control. Some say the rituals helped people process that loss of order. Others believe they were just local traditions, ways to mark the slow shift toward the hope of spring. Either way, you find yourself whispering an apology to the snow as you dump another bucket of grey water into the yard. You spend the day sloshing, slipping, digging, draining and cursing. Every chore takes twice as long in mud. The goat escapes twice. The pig eats a boot. You fall 3 times. Your sister loses a glove in a puddle so deep you swear it's bottomless. By sunset, you're soaked, exhausted, and smell like a compost heap with anxiety issues. But the sun did come out today, just for a little while. Enough to make the snow shine. Enough to remind you what the world looks like when it's not covered in white. And as awful as the thought is, there's something alive in it. Something moving. It's gross, yes. It's smelly and dangerous and frustrating. But it means things are waking up. The earth's turning over in its sleep, groaning, stretching. You sit by the fire that night. Mud still caked under your nails, muscles aching in places you didn't know you had. Your brother asks when the real spring will come. Soon, you say, and this time you almost believe it. By the end of the first week of thaw, everything stinks. Not metaphorically, literally. The whole village smells like wet dog and compost soup. You walk outside in the morning and it hits you like a punch. Mud, manure, damp straw, and a scent you only identify after a moment. Rotting thatch. The roofs are soaked through. One cottage lost half its top in the night. You saw the family dragging their bed frame into the barn at sunrise, looking like a pack of exhausted ghosts. You'd laugh, but you're too busy dealing with your own roof, which has started dripping in 2 separate spots, one of which is directly above your mother's spinning stool. She moved it without a word, which, in your house, is the most dangerous form of communication. Your brother tried to patch the leaks with a wax cloth and a lot of very hopeful language. It helped. A little. Your day begins with the usual routine. Step in a puddle before you've fully opened your eyes, slip on the icy edge of the threshold, realise your boot has a hole, then spend 10 minutes trying to light a fire that doesn't want to burn because everything's damp, including you. By the time breakfast is ready, oats again, you feel like you've already lost a battle. But outside, something's different. The trees are still bare, the sky still grey, but you catch a glimpse of green on the south side of the fence. Just a little, maybe moss, maybe a weed, but it's colour. You lean in, crouching beside it like you've found a relic from a better world. It's soft, damp, unmistakably alive, is the first real sign. So naturally, you tell everyone, you walk back into the cottage, fling open the door and shout, "There's green!" Your sister squeals, your mother snorts, your brother mutters, "About time," but even he sails. The village is still struggling. The thaw hasn't been kind. There's talk of a fever creeping through the western cottages. The Reeves chickens have started dying, no one knows why. And the grain stores are nearly gone. Every household is stretching scraps, boiling bones for the 2nd or 3rd time. You heard someone made a stew from dried nettles and shoe leather. You hope it was a joke, but even with all of that, people begin venturing farther from their cottages, testing the limits. You see the baker's son wading through knee-deep mud to check the condition of their garden plot. A group of children try to build a snowman but give up halfway and instead create something more akin to a snow troll, crooked, muddy, and oddly terrifying. They decorate it with twigs and charcoal lumps, you approve, and the sound of birds, faint at first, returns. Just a couple at sunrise, then more by midday. You hear one singing in the chimney, and your sister claps like it's a miracle. It kind of is. The world hasn't made this sound in months. It's strange how you forgot what warmth sounded like. And here's your factual gem. In medieval times, people marked the return of the spring not by dates on a calendar, but by signs. The thaw of a particular stream, the appearance of certain birds, the budding of a specific tree. For some, the return of the skylark meant the ground would soon be soft enough to plough. For others, it was the smell of damp earth or the feel of mud that no longer froze overnight. These were the clocks of the countryside. Of course, there were stranger signs too. Some villagers believed that spring would only come after the earth drank blood, usually referring to animal slaughter or seasonal sacrifice. You've heard whispers of old rituals, secret ones, done in the woods with candles and bones. Your family doesn't do those, but you've heard others do, especially when spring delays too long. Historians still debate how much of this was superstition and how much was desperate coping? Some argue these rituals were echoes of ancient pre-Christian beliefs, pagan rites lingering in the corners of peasant life. Others suggest they were simply metaphors, poetic ways of understanding the world when it refused to explain itself. But whether you believe in rituals or not, you do believe in this mud, because today you slip and fall into it, right in front of the tanner's apprentice who's carrying an entire armload of hides and laughs so hard he nearly drops them. You sit there for a moment, stunned, legs twisted, hands soaked in freezing brown sludge, and then you start laughing too. Because what else can you do? You look like a swamp creature. Your gloves are ruined. Your pride is soggy. But something in the absurdity of it breaks the tension that's been strangling you all winter. Later you strip off the muddy layers and hang them by the fire, where they steam like dying ghosts. Your mother gives you a look. Your brother mutters something about coordination. Your sister offers you a handful of clean straw and a single solemn nod of respect. In the afternoon, the sun appears, just for a moment, long enough to cast shadows, long enough to remind you what gold looks like when it spills across the snow. The whole village pauses. People step outside, blinking. One old woman throws her arms into the air and begins singing what might be a hymn, or might be an insult to Winter's mother. Either way, it feels holy. You sit on a log by the path, soaking it in. It's not warm, not really, but it's less cold, and that's enough. Here's the weird fact to end your muddy day. In certain parts of medieval Britain, people believed that if you buried a piece of cloth soaked in milk beneath the first green patch of earth you saw in spring, your cows would give more milk that year. You don't know if it's true, but when you see another green tuft by the barn, you consider borrowing a rag and trying it anyway, quietly, when no one's looking. By evening, your boots are drying, your legs ache, and your mind feels lighter. The thaw is still a mess, the roofs still drip, the village still smells like a wet beast, but the ice is breaking, and so are you, just enough to let the spring start finding its way in. The first real sun-dried day arrives like an apology. You don't trust it at first. You wake up expecting the usual, your breath fogging in the cold air, the fire barely embers, your limbs stiff with that familiar winter ache. But something feels off. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. You blink, sit up, and realise it's light. Real light. Not the dim, grey, gloomy haze you've lived under for months, but golden, spilling through the cracks of the shutter like it wants to be let in. You jump up so fast you nearly trip over the pig, who snorts in protest and rolls onto her side. She'll wake up when the world ends, and not a second before. Your mother is already up, standing by the window with the shutters open, eyes squinting against the brightness. The snow hasn't fully gone, patches still cling stubbornly to the shadows, but the mud has started to dry at the edges, turning from a sinkhole into something vaguely solid. And the sky. Blue, blue, no clouds, no haze, just sky. It's drying, your mother murmurs, almost reverently. Outside, the village is in motion. Actual motion, not the trudging, sloshing, miserable sort. People are carrying things, moving things, shouting things. You spot the tanner dragging racks of stiff hides into the open air. The smith is laying out tools on a sun-warmed bench. And the children? They're barefoot. Barefoot. Running half naked across still soggy earth like they've been freed from some ancient curse. You grab your own boots, still damp, still crusted with evidence of your glorious face-first encounter with Thor mud, but they'll do. You're not missing this day. Outside, the warmth hits different. It's not the sting of winter sun on icy skin. It's soft. It doesn't demand. It welcomes. For the first time in months, you take a deep breath and don't smell smoke, or rot, or desperation. Just earth. Wet. Rich. Almost sweet. That smell of things waking up. You help your brother unstick the cartwheel from a half-frozen rut. Together, you heave it free with a satisfying squelch, then wheel it toward the garden plot behind the cottage. That space, ignored, snow-covered, cursed with frost for weeks, is now speckled with hopeful green. Not much, but enough. A few wild onions are poking through, something that might be chickweed. You get on your knees, press your fingers into the dirt and grin. It's time to plant. Not today, of course, the ground is still too wet. But soon. And planting means planning. You make a list in your head. Peas first, then cabbage, maybe beets, carrots if the seed stock holds. Potatoes eventually once the frost fully pulls back from the earth. You'll need to mend the fence, check the seed bags, convince the goat to stop trying to eat the garden markers. And speaking of livestock, the animals are thrilled. The goat prances, the pig rolls in the sun like a royal seal. Even the chickens look less homicidal. You scatter feed and they rush toward it, scratching with frantic glee. You didn't realise how much you missed the sound of chickens just being chickens. People are talking again, not about sickness, not about death or starvation or wolves, about work. Good old-fashioned, back-breaking, hopeful work. The kind that gives blisters and exhaustion, but also a reason to wake up. The weaver speaks of dyeing cloth again once the madder root grows. The brewer's apprentice wonders aloud if they can coax a barrel out of what's left of last year's barley. Someone mentions the festival tentatively, like they're afraid to jinx it. The thought of music and dancing and bread that doesn't taste like despair sends a little jolt through your chest. You take the clothesline down from its winter hook and hang it between the cottage and the old apple tree. It sags a little under the weight of stiff, sour-smelling garments, but it's up, and for the first time in months, you watch steam rise as the sun starts to dry something, not freeze, not rot, just dry. Here's your honest historical tidbit. The arrival of true spring was a labour holiday in itself. In many medieval villages, cleaning days were declared, not because people suddenly remembered hygiene, but because winter made everything too awful to touch. Walls were scrubbed with vindika, linens aired out, floors swept for the first time in weeks. Doors were flung open, not for the warmth, they still didn't trust that, but to let the house breathe again. And your fringe fact for today: in some medieval communities, the return of the sun after a hard winter was marked with a ritual called beating the bounds. Villagers would walk the perimeter of their lands, singing, chanting, even whipping the earth with branches to wake it up. Children were sometimes lightly whipped too, so they'd remember the land. You're not saying that's a great idea, but if your brother makes another joke about your mud dive, you're considering reviving the tradition. Scholars argue about whether these spring celebrations were secular or sacred, rooted in agriculture or older pre-Christian fertility rites. But you know one thing: when the sun returns, you celebrate. Doesn't matter why, the sun itself is reason enough. You work all day, not because someone makes you, not because you have to, but because the light pulls you outside like a tide, and you can't stand the idea of wasting a single second of it. You patch a section of a roof with fresh straw, you rake the garden bed and turn the soil. You clean the pig pen, not well, but enough. You even wash your face with snowmelt and soapwort and feel like a person again. By evening your arms are sore, your legs ache, and your skin is pink from too much wind and too much joy. You sit on the bench outside watching the light fade from gold to lavender, and sip hot broth that somehow tastes better than it did 2 days ago. Maybe everything tastes better in the sun. Your mother hums while she stitches, your sister braids her own hair, your brother carves something with a bit of stubborn wood. No one talks much, no one has to, the quiet is no longer heavy, it's peaceful. Later that night before bed, you step outside one last time. The stars are out, bright, sharp, endless. You see your breath still, but it doesn't bother you. You feel it now, that edge of winter lifting. The long, slow melt into something softer. It's not over. Not yet, but you're on the other side of the worst of it, and the sun is back, the earth is turning, and you're still here. You wake to birdsong, not the lonely call of a crow or the frantic flap of a sparrow hunting scraps, but real birdsong. Full-throated, layered, almost orchestral, it floods the cottage before your eyes even open, weaving into your dreams and gently tugging you back to the waking world. When you finally sit up, rubbing your face with stiff hands, the sun is already warming the floorboards, and your siblings are stretching like cats near the hearth, blinking in the golden light like it's something that they've never seen before. Outside, everything smells new. Not just damp earth or smoke or the lingering rot of thaw, but grass. Real grass, sweet and sharp. You step out barefoot, just to feel the packed earth under your toes. And sure enough, the path that yesterday was mud is now firm and dry, rimmed with little green shoots poking up along the edge. It's here, not the idea of spring, not the promise, the actual thing, the season itself, draped in birdsong and bright morning and tiny yellow flowers you don't even have a name for. And the village has woken up like someone rang a bell inside every cottage. You see it first in the movement. People carrying tools that haven't seen daylight in months. Hoes and rakes, baskets, buckets, even the wheelbarrow someone pulled out from under a tarp and reassembled like a sacred relic. The blacksmith is already out front sharpening plough blades. The cooper is tapping along a row of staves like he's conducting a symphony. and the air is full of purposeful noise, hammering, sweeping, laughing, shouting. The village hasn't felt this alive since the harvest festival, and maybe not even then. Today is the first true field day, the day you stop surviving and start working towards something again. You gather your tools, handle worn smooth, blade rusted at the edges, and head for the garden plot behind the cottage. Your mother is already there, kneeling in the dirt like it's an altar, sleeves rolled, headscarf loose, hands deep in the earth. She doesn't even look up when you arrive, just gestures to the far corner and says, "Start with the roots." So you do, you dig, you plant, you work. There's no fanfare, no grand declaration that winter is over, just the slow, glorious return of normal. Rows marked with twine, seed sacks opened with reverence. The simple thrill of placing a bulb into warm soil and knowing that, in time, something green will rise, and beneath all that dirt, something else is shifting. Hope. It's not loud, it doesn't announce itself. It hums under your skin like the memory of a song you used to know. Mid-morning, you wipe your brow and sit back on your heels, looking over the half-finished plot. Your fingers ache, your back already tight, and there's dirt under your nails that probably won't come out until midsummer, but it's the best you've felt in weeks. Then comes the surprise. Someone shouts near the edge of the village, a mix of panic and joy. You stand, shielding your eyes, and watch as a group of children sprint past, waving their arms and pointing. You catch the words sheep and back, and then you run. You all do. Half the village converges on the west gate where the hill path dips low, and sure enough, there they are. The shepherds, 2 of them, tired, filthy, grinning, and behind them, a ragged, shaggy, half-starved line of sheep that looks like it's been through every circle of winter hell. But they're back. The flock survived. Someone cheers, someone cries, someone laughs so hard they drop the basket they were holding. The sheep were sent to winter pasture months ago, down near the coast, where the frost doesn't bite so hard. Everyone knew it was a risk. Travel in winter is always a gamble. You'd all but given up on them. But here they are, clumping down the muddy road, bleating like royalty. And they bring more than just wool and milk and meat. They bring proof that not everything was lost, that not everything froze or broke or faded. You spend the afternoon helping set up temporary pens, feeding the thinnest sheep scraps of hay, watching the children name them like their new pets. Your sister picks out one with a crooked ear and insists it winked at her. You don't argue, let her have it. And here's a grounded little historical gem for you. Many medieval villages practiced transhumance, the seasonal movement of livestock between highland and lowland pastures. It wasn't just tradition, it was survival. And when the herders returned, it wasn't just a logistical victory, it was a deeply emotional moment. A visible living sign that the hardest part of the year was behind you. Now here's the strange part. In some communities, sheep returning in the spring were blessed. Literally. The priest would sprinkle them with holy water, people would sing, and the animals would be walked around the edge of the village to reclaim the land. There are records of villagers dancing with garlands, tying ribbons to the lead sheep's horns, even writing songs just for the occasion. You can't help but wonder what your priest would say if you asked him to sing to a sheep. There's scholarly debate over whether these rituals were religious, agricultural, or just the medieval version of a block party. But the result is the same. Joy. Relief. A deep breath after months of holding it in. You end the day with your back sore, your face sunburned, and your arms full of kindling from the now accessible woodshed. The air smells of tilled earth and warm fleece. Dinner is better than usual. Flatbread, a bit of cheese, and some early greens from the south-facing wall garden. It tastes like salt and satisfaction. That night the sky is still clear. The stars hang low and bright, and for once the wind is calm. You sit outside for a long while, letting the warmth settle into your skin. Somewhere nearby, someone is playing a lute. Not well, but with heart. You don't recognize the song, doesn't matter. It feels like a beginning. You go to bed with sore muscles, dirt in your hair, and the smell of sheep still lingering on your cloak. It's perfect. The morning mist rises from the fields like steam off a hot bath, and for the first time in half a year you can see dew instead of frost. Real dew. Soft. Shimmering. Not dangerous, not biting, just water, resting gently on new grass. You step into it barefoot the way your grandmother once taught you, to wake your blood for planting. At the time you thought she just liked giving folksy reasons for doing weird things. Now you know better. Some things don't need explanation. The earth is warm under your feet. That's enough. It's early. Earlier than you normally dare to rise in winter. But the sun's up before you, and now so are you. Today is a big one. The village is buzzing before breakfast, and not with complaints or crises, but with energy, with purpose. It's planting day, not just in the garden, the fields, the real ones. The whole village gathers near the western gate, where the frost-thawed land stretches wide like a blank page. The reeve calls names, assigns plots, and for once, nobody argues. Everyone is too busy squinting at the horizon, measuring light, moisture, and memory. They mark furrows with string and sticks, place stones at corners, draw invisible lines with their feet. You feel the air shift. Oh, not just the weather, but the village itself. It's ready. Your family's plot lies near the bend in the stream, on land that's stubborn but decent. You grab the hoe, your brother shoulders the seed sack, and your sister dances ahead of you, giggling, "I'll spot the worms." She has big plans for her garden spirits, ones that require a worm army and at least 3 songs sung directly into the dirt. You let her have her magic. This day already feels enchanted. By midday, you've planted rows of peas and onions, and you're beginning on the barley. The sky is blinding blue, the earth loose and welcoming, and your arms ache in the best possible way. You wipe sweat from your brow with a sleeve already crusted with dust and look out across the field. And you're not alone. Everywhere you look, someone's digging, raking, seeding. Children run with their buckets. Mothers sing as they scatter seed. Fathers shout across plots, teasing and joking, and daring each other to make straighter rows. It's not celebration exactly, it's better. It's hope made visible, work with purpose, and then someone brings out the bread. It's flat, sun-warmed, rubbed with the last of last summer's garlic, and torn into chunks by whoever isn't holding a hoe. No feast, but it might as well be. You eat with dirt under your nails, laughing with a mouthful of crumbs, sitting in the grass between furrows like kings without thrones, but plenty of sky. That's when the bell rings. Not the church bell, the big one. The seasonal bell, pulled down from its hook in the granary rafters, dusted off and rung only twice a year, once at the end of harvest and once today. It tolls once, twice, 3 times, then silence. And the village cheers, because now it's official, the land is open, the cycle begins again, what was cold and locked and still is now moving. You are planting not just seeds but time, a promise to return, a belief in a future you cannot see. Here's your final historical anchor. The planting season in medieval Europe was more than agricultural, it was spiritual. Every seed, every furrow, every row was a prayer. Priests would bless the fields, neighbours would share tools and labour, and some villages believed the first furrow had to be cut by a virgin or a priest, or, oddly, a person who'd never told a lie, which made planting season a rather awkward time for the village liar. And your fringe fact to finish. In some traditions, the first seed sown was kissed, not because anyone thought the seed needed affection, but because it symbolised love for the land. If you kissed the seed, the land would remember. It's silly. It's sweet. And this morning you watched your sister kiss 3 peas and whisper, "Grow big or else." Some scholars argue that this ritualism around planting is exaggerated, that peasants were practical people too tired to romanticize dirt. But others insist that in the face of uncertainty, you have to wrap your labour in meaning. Otherwise it's just toil, and toil breaks you. But faith, even the kind tied to a seed, can build you up again. You stay in the field until the light begins to dip. Your hands are raw, your back protests every movement, and your stomach growls like a cornered wolf. But you are happy. You walk home through a village transformed. The smoke from evening fires curls into a calm sky. Children carry baskets of early greens like treasures. Someone's baking something that smells like spice and sugar and history. And everyone, even the grumpiest among you, walks a little taller tonight. At home, you wash your hands in warm water and sit beside the fire, watching your siblings play with sticks and shadows. Your mother stitches in silence, her shoulders relaxed in a way they haven't been for months. Your brother dozes with a half-carved spoon on his lap. Your sister sets her worm army free under a damp cloth, whispering her final instructions for the night. You go to bed early, with sore limbs and a full heart. Tomorrow will be more work, the next day too, and the hunger hasn't vanished. The woods still hold danger, the roof still leaks a bit when it rains, but something has changed. You are planting. You're moving forward. You've passed through the dark, and you're still here. The fire crackles low, just enough to cast a warm glow against the cottage walls. You lie still beneath your blanket, skin still tingling from the work of the day and the sun that left its faint kiss on your cheeks. Every joint in your body hums with the pleasant ache of honest labour, the kind that tells you, without a word, you've done something worth doing today. And now, at last, there's nothing left to do but rest. Your breathing slows. The air is cooler now, but not harsh, not bitter. It smells faintly of earth and ash and wool. The last light of the evening stretches across the floor like a golden ribbon before fading into the corners of the room. Outside you hear the creak of a barn door settling, the soft murmur of the stream flowing free again, and, just barely, a sheep bleating in its sleep. A good sound, a safe sound, and above all that, the wind has softened. Not gone, but gentle, brushing across the roof like it's saying you made it, because you did. You really did. Through the cold that cracked your hands, through nights when you weren't sure what you'd eat the next day, through sickness, snow and fear, through howling wolves and knocking strangers, through stories whispered in the dark and days that dragged on like years, through the endless grey, through the stillness, through the thaw. You didn't just survive winter, you endured it. You learned its rhythm, matched its silence, and pushed back when it pressed in too close. You made do, made socks, made soup, made mistakes. You kept the fire alive, sometimes barely, sometimes brilliantly. You watched for the signs, waited for the sun, and when it finally came, you didn't hesitate. You stepped back into the light. The land is waking now, and you somehow still have the strength to meet it, to till it, to trust it, to begin again. The first seeds are in the soil, and somewhere deep inside you another one is starting to grow too, the quiet certainty that you can face the next cold season when it comes, because you've done it before. So now you let yourself rest. Let the muscles relax. Let the thoughts drift. Let the warmth of the day wrap around you like the thickest, softest blanket. No more rushing. No more fear. Just the simple peace of a body well used and a world slowly healing. Sleep now, villager. The stars are watching the field. The fire will hold through the night. And spring will take care of the rest.